Oh, look at that. We're live, probably. And I'm so lazy that I just said, "Hey, Derek, are you available? Do you want to talk?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure. Sure, why not? Let's talk. Let's talk." I don't even have to change the layout. I don't have to change the screen. I don't have to do anything.
That's what we do.
That's what we do. You see, there's a secret of that's actually a secret of GMing. Do as little prep as possible. So that's what I'm doing. I'm doing as little prep as possible.
Yeah, isn't it one of the rules from the dungeon craft column is you only do prep that you know that you need.
Right.
It is the first rule of dungeon craft, and it is never prepare more than you need.
Right.
And
Yep.
it is.
You're looking for it. Well, that's what I did. I was like, oh, it's Monday. Derek, are you around? Like, I never do it more than one day. So I really should. The thing is, if the show was like on a Friday, I'd probably do it on a Monday. But because the show's on a Tuesday, I always do the guests on a Monday.
We got a 3.5 GMG here.
Well, look at that.
There you go. There it is.
Wow. Who's that?
Never force yourself to create more than you must.
What?
The first rule of dungeon craft.
Is that you? Did you write that yourself?
No, I mean Ray Winiger said, write this on the inside cover of your GMG. Or
Really?
your DMG. Yep. And so like all my DMGs have it written on the inside cover.
Oh my god.
And so it says never force yourself to create more than you
You
must.
might win the geek contest. We were having a geek contest before this started to see how geeky we are, but we're up there. We're like in the stratosphere of geekdom.
It's pretty high. I mean, yeah, I mean, you know,
well, I went to Carnegie Mellon. Mark went to MIT. You went to
Case Western. So I think Mark wins, but that's
disagree. Strongly disagree.
Listen, if you go by to annual tuition, Mark wins.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I went 5 years. Does that count? Because
it depends. That could either be a good thing or a bad thing.
Triple major.
All right. Well, I only had 2, so you're winning there.
There you go. You see, the geek contest continues.
Man, this is so bad. London says I can't be that much of a geek. I don't watch anime.
You know, that's the funny thing. That is one of my weak spots. When I was a kid, I was heavily into Macross and what was it? The Starlight Express. The other one, Galaxy Express. Like I was into Fist of the North Star, Macross, Yamato. It was a Space Rangers, Star Rangers, whatever. I loved all those shows. But then as I've grown up, I can't watch them. But everyone on my podcasts watch it extensively, and they never stop talking about anime. They're like Crunchyroll people and watch everything. So
yeah, it's not for me. I like Record of Lodoss War, which is the D&D themed anime from the late 80s, I think early 90s, and that's because it's basically Dungeons and Dragons. So I appreciate it.
Lugs Gaming, thank you very much. It really has to do with the animation style. Is that I am a bit of a snob, and got a whole bunch of new people. Hey Dan, thank you for subscribing.
Listen, I've learned this very. Be careful what you say about anime. It's
I know. Well, the thing is, I love the stories, and I almost want One Piece.
Don't you read some of the those light novels and dungeon core stories and other things like that? You just don't watch the anime.
No, I try because I mean I like beautiful anime, like really well done animation. Like I was watching like Arcane. I mean that's not anime. Arcane, I mean the animation in Arcane is to a level of insanity. Like I just sit there and love watching that, or Love and Robots. Like I really like to see, well done animation, and that kind of takes me out of it. Is that I love the stories, I love JRPGs, I love the insanity of anime, and that's what I was saying. Is I kind of want to read One Piece because everyone's talking about it, and it's now like the second most popular it was a comic of all time, it passed Batman recently or something, and it's just got it's really up there, and the story sounds fantastic. So,
all right, so the answer to the question, why do long-term fans hate that D&D is cool now? It's because D&D has to do with anime, so that's why I hate it now. No.
Do they hate that it's cool now?
Well, do they hate that it's cool now?
No, I was trying to make an anime joke there.
Okay.
But,
well, do you watch anime, Mark? Or no?
Yeah.
Oh, you do? What do you like? What's some of your favorites?
I mean, I don't know. It just depends on the time or the situation. Like, just in general, it's like kind of a fluffy, fillery thing to have on in the background while doing something else.
Really? You have to kind of pay attention, don't you? Like, that's the thing.
Nah.
No? Okay.
And maybe that's the thing, because you don't watch it because of the animation style, but I'm not usually paying that much attention to it anyway, so I don't really see like the fine details of whether or not the animation is high quality or not, as long as like the voice acting is good, and every once in a while when I look up I can tell what's going on.
It's like me with Star Trek, because I have Star Trek on pretty much every day. Like, that's all I have on, and it's just
Star Trek is good for that too.
It's soul food. It's just like, oh, I've seen this episode 10,000 times and I don't care, because it's very relaxing to watch. I think we talked about that last week.
We did.
Yeah, there's a lot of these shows I just like to have on. Like right now, I have Parks and Rec on, and I've seen Parks and Rec 10 million times, but it's very relaxing to watch Parks and Rec. And then like Eyes of the Dragon or whatever, I haven't seen a single episode, or even the new Lord of the Rings, even though I love Lord of the Rings, because it feels like work. It feels like I'm gonna have to sit there and pay attention, and
that makes actually a certain amount of sense. Like you said, it's like comfort food. I mean,
yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on anime, is that you just kind of don't have to pay a lot of attention to it.
Yeah, I think my take on it is, if I don't have to pay a lot of attention to it, or I'm not going to pay a lot of attention to it, I don't pay any attention to it. So in other words, I don't watch it. Like for me, it's like I see people all the time who go, oh, I watch the show while I'm doing this. One of the reasons I don't watch a lot of television shows, which is to say I don't watch television shows, period, is because that's it. I do the one thing. I watch the show. I'm watching for script writing, for directing, for lighting, for hidden meanings, for whatever. I'm really invested, and that obviously means that that's what I'm doing. And so it's like, when you talk about a show that's going to be, I don't know, 10 or 15 hours over the course of, say, a season, I'm like, am I really prepared to invest 10 or 15 hours into this? Yes or no?
Yet I'm going through my JRPG. I have a new mantra that I'm not. Here's my Steam Deck. I am not buying any more games. I have 5,000 games on Steam, and I'm like,
I have 5.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. And one of them is Tabletop Simulator, so arguably that doesn't count.
That's like that's an infinite number of games right there. And I said,
how many games did you say you have, Steven?
I can open up my Steam, but it's about 9. It's like 900. It's way too many. And I was like,
that is way too many.
It's way too many. And I was like, that's it. I'm not buying any more games. I'm good. I'm going through, and now I'm playing 100-hour JRPGs, and I'm sitting here. But that's what I'm doing instead of watching Eyes of the Dragon. Because every night I play 3 or 4 more hours of my JRPG.
House of the Dragon.
Whatever. I don't even care. Eyes of the Dragon. That's actually Eyes of the Dragon. That's a Stephen King novel. I read it like 10 times. I love that novel.
It's like Stephen King's D&D novel, right?
Oh, it's his fantasy novel.
Yeah, fantasy.
I love Stephen King's writing. His writing is superb. He does a lot of tricks in his writing. And if you want to read his best writing, is his nonfiction, or his reviews in the New York Times are incredible. And God, yeah, I kind of miss Stephen King. He was like the hotness for a long time.
He was. One of my favorite things I've seen in the last couple of years is it's like a author interviews author, and it's George R.R. Martin and Stephen King.
Wow. Yeah,
and they're kind of just going back and forth. And George R.R. Martin asked a great question. He goes, I got a question for you. How the F do you write so much? And the audience loses their mind. And Stephen King starts ribbing him a little bit, because he's like, I love your work. I'd love to be able to finish it, and read it someday, so it's kind of funny.
Well, some authors, I mean, look at Brandon Sanderson. He writes even more than Stephen King. Brandon Sanderson's a monster.
He's the master.
He is
Anderson writes
that
so
he-
much.
that
He-
Kickstarter announcement
oh.
video was
That was hilarious.
that was the chef's kiss moment of just
Brandon, it's so funny.
Anderson writes about the same amount that I do each day on average, but then when he finished his most recent Stormlight book, he wrote an amount that I just cannot believe within 24 hours.
He writes so
it's
much.
like 6 times as much as his normal average.
Yeah. He's
Like,
it's that
that's
clean
so
it's that clean it's that clean Utah air.
It is. Well, it's a clean living. that is it's funny. I think I've told the story is that I found Sanderson after what is it, The Way of Kings, the first book. And I've read that book 3 times. I have all of his books signed. I love his books. I've read almost everything of his. And I went to Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con, and it was one of those things where I don't know, he was talking at like 3:00. So me and John Statz, who was still working in Blizzard at the time, went and sat at like the front row at like 10 and just sat there the whole time watching everything before it, just make sure we had good seats. And not that many people, like, people knew who he was, but it wasn't to this level. Like, it was popular, but it wasn't that popular. And I remember he was like so surprised that there was like people there. This was like just when he was taking off. And then afterwards we were talking to him, and of course he's such a big geek. He plays like endless Magic the Gathering, endless World of Warcraft, all endless D&D, all these things. And then he even went afterwards, because then he was talking about World of Warcraft, and then he went to visit Blizzard like a few weeks later. That John got an invite for him to come and talk to the authors, the programmers at Blizzard, to like talk to them about like world building and stuff. So, and now, good luck. Good luck getting in touch with him. It's like it's impossible. So
he is the Grandmaster. But yeah, I did like what Sanderson did with Wheel of Time, and I like that series.
Never finished it. I think we talked about that too, because we talked about too many. You guys went on and on. I'm like,
that's what we do.
Yeah, I know. But the problem is also, I read it when it was coming out. Like, I read Wheel of Time book 1 when it came out, and book 2. Like, I kept reading them as they come out.
That is definitely an early reading. I was reading it when it was coming out, but there were still like some number of them had already come out when I started, like 5 or so.
I saw George R.R. Martin. I forgot what's the name of the con that's in Washington, D.C. I went down there with a friend of mine. This is in the mid-90s, and he was there, and he was like, book 3 or 4 just came out, and he was like, yeah, I think it'll be like 5, maybe 6 books. And it was like, come on, really? And it's like, I want to read the last ones, but it's like the problem with that series is I hate when authors start a trilogy, it becomes a gargantuan bestseller, and then they change the characters, they change, you could tell how it was modified and changed. You could just tell, and it just bothers me.
Welcome to, that's network television. That's pretty much everything, right? So
yeah, in some ways, but they're smarter now, though.
Wait, Steven, are you saying you don't like Wheel of Time because it became cool?
Maybe that might be. You know what? That's a good segue. I might not like Wheel of Time, not because it became too cool. That's right. That's exactly right.
I now it's a hit. Well, I don't know if it's a hit, but it's an Amazon Prime. It's not an Amazon Prime show. It's just
okay. It's an okay. So one of the reasons why I chose this topic, is that I have been very interested recently about how geek culture, especially now, has become culture. It's not geek culture. And I was reading about how Lord of the Rings came out 20 years ago. The first Avengers, Iron Man, came out 15 years ago. Basically, it's been a generation, a full generation. Blade came out in the 90s. Oh my God. Like, so now there's an entire generation where Avengers and superheroes is culture. It's not something new. It's not like, oh, these superhero movies. This is what Disney is, and this just is culture. And now things like D&D are starting just to become culture. It's not, oh, that D&D geeky thing. I was telling before that my daughter's in college, and half of her professors regularly talk about Dungeons and Dragons in their class. Like, literally, her statistics class, they're using D&D dice, as she called them, in her statistic class. Her English class, her first assignment is to do an alignment chart.
Yeah.
I was like, she's like, a D&D alignment chart, Dad. I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? It is so mainstream that it is just part of life.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, it's you know, I mean, this is happened. I mean, to many things. You know, to rock music, which was kind of originally, which was originally sort of more of an African American R&B thing, and then it kind of got appropriated by white people who then Elvis and rock, and then it became. But now it's like we don't even think of that as being any. It's just that's just music now. It's not even like this thing. And so the idea of like listening to this type of music because it's rebellious is silly now. We just accept it as it's just mainstream.
True.
And so it just kind of I think that happens with so many things. You mentioned comics and stuff in the movies, and so I think ultimately I don't hate. I'm a long-term fan. So do long-term fans hate that D&D is cool now? I don't think so. But what I do think, I'll speak on behalf of myself. I don't want to put words in other people's mouth, but I will say this. I will say that there has been a regression to the mean, right? And that is to say that role-playing games and this whole hobby was always a fairly, obviously, niche hobby. And so kind of by definition, you were in that central bell curve. But as it's become more mainstream, where you used to be in sort of the central bell curve, you haven't changed. But from the perspective of the hobby and the genre, you have now moved to one of the extremes. Your taste, your feel, what you want out of a TTRPG and what you think TTRPGs are hasn't changed at all. But the hobby has changed around you. As people have come in, the expectations have shifted dramatically. And in terms of what people want out of a game and what people expect out of a game and the kind of games that are being produced. And I think that has left some, D&D fans feeling like, it's awesome that you all are enjoying and are embracing this hobby. And that's great, but there's a certain element there of like, but what about me? And because I used to be the target demo and now I'm not the target demo.
You are totally not the target demo.
Right.
No way. In fact, that's what half of you look on YouTube, half of those D&D, especially with oneD&D.
Yes.
That's how I basically got everything right. I'm like, what is the target demo for mainstream? That is what they're going to do. And that is what they're doing. Right. And it is pissing off a lot of people.
so, and I mean, you'll probably appreciate this. So do I hate that D&D is cool now? No. But do I hate that D&D is like profitable now? Yes. Because I think ultimately what really has changed is there's a lot of money in it now. And that has changed the way, I mean, we've seen that with the oneD&D announcements and the way that they are approaching things and the way that, we see these Kickstarters come in and people just show up out of thin air and, they slap something on it and they get a $500,000 or some crazy amount of money.
Totally not true, by the way.
Totally not true.
No, only as someone who does them, let me tell you, the cream is rising to the top on the Kickstarters. That is 100% true.
All right, I'll buy from you. But I mean, I see
a few that make a lot, but there's a lot if you go on there. Even just look at similar projects that are making like 5,000, 10,000.
Yeah. I mean, not that they don't do well, but they're not making six figures. They're just there's a lot. I'd say 90% of them don't.
Yeah,
fair enough. I just think that ultimately, when there's a lot of money at play, now you're the one who said it first, Stephen, that the D&D will be $1 billion brand.
It already is.
All right. So
it already is $1 billion brand. It's a multi-billion dollar brand.
Well, those are numbers that people aren't, and you're going to see like, it's going to get Disney-fied to a certain extent. You know what I mean? Like it's going to get.
It's already getting Disney. It already was Disney-fied.
But we're really seeing the start.
Now you're starting to see it in real time.
The movies and the action figures and the Funko Pops.
Well, that was the thing is that Star Wars and Marvel was Disney-fied almost slowly, and geeks were so happy, I think, that the geek was becoming mainstream that they almost didn't care.
Right.
And it was like, oh my god, I was so happy. I remember how happy everyone was when the Avengers came out. Like, that was a celebration that I've never seen. People were losing their minds. It was like, this is incredible that they were able to take all those movies and combine them and make one movie, and people, it did so well. I was so excited. But you know what? There's been 100 Marvel movies since. There's a trillion television shows. This is now culture. And now we're starting to see it happen to a new brand. We're starting to actually see it finally in real time, that D&D is going to be turned into this. And I think that is why people are getting upset, because they see what happened to Disney.
Right.
And,
we're very
Lord
excited.
of the Rings.
We were very excited at first, and then we saw what kind of happened to it, and but part of that is to be appealing to the wider audience. You have to be a bit more, I'll call it watered down. I don't know if that's the right term.
No,
but
you do. Like, what's a good example? So in the original Superman, they used to say truth, justice, and the American way. Do you remember that?
Sure, of
in
course.
all the new Supermans, they say truth, justice, and all that stuff.
Right.
To appeal to a wider audience.
Worldwide audience.
Right.
And you want to make sure you can sell in China
of
and
course,
all this other stuff, right?
And then that saying is gone now.
Right.
And they've watered down.
I'm at least happy that it's not keeping to the original Superman punching up poor people and other things that he
You're
did.
completely
in some of those
right.
comics.
Oh, dude, if you look at old comics, I always think of wasn't that Cool World? Ghost World. If anyone saw Ghost World, there's that
Scarlett Johansson,
yeah, and Steve Buscemi. There's a whole thing about there how he was really into Cook's Chicken, and how Cook's Chicken started out as this incredibly horribly racist thing in the 80s. It's a fake chicken place, and everyone forgot about it, and it got completely whitewashed to now it's like very corporate. It's like, if you read some of these comics, and some things back then.
And to be clear, I mean, a lot of the changes that I think have been happening within the RPG space are for the better, and for the good. And I understand that there's a certain amount of, there's always are you throwing the baby out with the bathwater, type reaction and concern for some people. But, on the whole and on the bias, I think it's fine. I think what kind of, for me personally, RPGs used to be, for me, this sort of special thing that defined who I was. And when something goes mainstream, it becomes less special. It's the line from The Incredibles, right? When everyone's special, no one is, or something like that, right?
When everyone's
that's
special.
The villain.
That's what I'm saying.
That's my favorite line.
It doesn't make you the good guy.
No, that's
right.
Listen, Syndrome was incredible.
Syndrome.
Yeah,
I love that.
I think the answer to this whole question that we've been dancing around is, do long-term fans hate the D&D is cool now? Some do, but it kind of depends on your, I guess, is hipsterness the correct word for it? How hipster someone is, how much they want to be doing the thing that isn't the mainstream, that sets them apart, that shows that they're different. Because I will go with something that's similar to what Steven said about the D&D movie, where people were like, critiquing small parts. And
including
Steven was
you,
like,
Derik.
Look, when we were kids, we just wanted there to be a D&D movie at all that wasn't. And then the first one we got was, oh my gosh, not very good. And this one looks much better than that. So for me, younger me did not feel like that I was special or elite for being one of the only people who was playing D&D.
I did.
I would have much rather preferred that everybody else was playing D&D as well. That would have been much more fun. So I absolutely am on the other end of the spectrum from hipsterism, and in terms of, I'm a very long-term fan, not as long-term as Steven, who started from the beginning. Probably close to you, Derik, but maybe not quite.
Late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, I started
I'm early
literally at the beginning, because I'm older.
But yeah, so I mean, again, ultimately, I think role-playing games are awesome, and I think people should be playing them, and I think they should be having fun with them, and I think they should be supporting them, and I think there's a role-playing game out there probably for everyone. You know, I always say the same thing about board games. I think there's a board game out there for everyone. But I do feel like there is a, you know, a little bit of losing, you know,
losing your identity. That's what it is.
Yeah, you're losing your identity because, again, this, I mean, for lack of a better word, this hobby used to be kind of mine. And I use that term.
Well, there's gatekeeping. But, it was a very gatekeeping hobby. But this has happened in all of, like, I've seen it. I was there. It's like I saw it happen with video games. I saw it happen with computers. I saw it happen with the internet. Like every single thing that I embraced, you know, like Lord of the Rings, fantasy, all this stuff. Hell, I would even go so far. I'm going to get weird. Yeah. Football. Okay. Back in the 80s. Not that far long ago, like 1986, the average football player was making, you're not even going to believe when I tell you this. How much do you think the average football player was making in 1986? Not that long ago. Average.
$10.
Close. No, sir, $70,000.
Sure.
That's it. Now think about it. I mean, it's like, and even back then, you're like, oh, well, back then, okay, say maybe that's $200,000. That was average. And this professional football in the 80s. In fact, that's like a big thing. Like Boomer Esiason like sued and struck because he was the first player ever to make $1 million. And that was like in the 90s.
Well, I think your football analogy though is an interesting one though.
Right.
Because let's say, because it's kind of the same, but it also paints a picture of how it's different. Let's say you're a big football fan in the 80s into the 90s.
Right.
And you've got season tickets, you've got great seats, you can go to Super Bowls because they're not, you know, whatever.
Wasn't that popular.
Now, cut to 20 years later, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar brand.
It's insane.
And nosebleed seats for the Browns are like $90 or $100.
Oh, easily.
Right?
Well, just parking. Parking is like $200.
And so the popularity of the sport has, in some ways, pushed you out of it.
Yes.
Or at least the way that you used to experience it.
Definitely.
But what's interesting, though, is the popularity of role-playing games has only created a wealth of new people creating new products. I mean, Roll for Combat itself, right, is an example of this, right? Yeah. Where now, in some ways, you have more choices than ever. And yes, I have expressed my concerns that, you know, the shadow of D&D is very long and large, and that you know, it has the potential to eclipse or drown out you know, the smaller folks. But at the same time, you know, I mean, I'm seeing a ton of new games coming out all the time. There's been more Powered by the Apocalypse games that have released in the last 10 years than there were in the 10 years before it. So, you know, I think overall, I think it's interesting because in my experience, rather than kind of pushing you out of the game experience, you know, you're into it. It's a larger, more fertile market.
Well,
I
it's
think
definitely
it raises a rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah, I mean, it helps everyone.
But a big boat can also swamp you in its wake. You know what I mean?
It can. But I think that it's just definitely good for everyone to, like, except I guess people who enjoy gatekeeping elements, to remove the gatekeeping elements. It's good for almost everyone. And yes, there will be people who are like, I like gatekeeping, but
Actually, wait, I want to answer a question because William Goodwin. By the way, anyone who wants to ask questions, feel free. Subscribe. Do give us likes, because if we get 50 likes, we make Derik do something silly. So we got to get those likes. Oh, we got more than 50 people. We can easily get 50 likes. Like that button. Subscribe. Super chats get answered right away. But William wrote, Roll for Combat has to sell D&D to attract customers. That is an interesting idea. I do sell it for the YouTubes, and I do put the D&D in the titles for the YouTubes, because that does do, well, quite frankly, incredibly better than Pathfinder alone. But for our books, for D&D versus Pathfinder, it is a 50-50 split, and I'd almost say Pathfinder might do better, especially in virtual tabletop. It's actually no contest. So don't think
we're
that
virtually the only people out there on Kickstarter who have those percentages though, and who are making 6 digits from the Pathfinder 2 stuff alone. like
Well,
nobody else is.
I was going to say, I think there's a couple of things. Number one, I mean, obviously the third party market for Pathfinder is limited. And so, yes, you know, Pathfinder might be a much smaller market, but you're capturing a much larger percentage share of that market because there's not a lot of competition. And, you know, Pathfinder 2, the people who play it tend to be more of a, what do I want to say, niche gamer, and niche gamers probably tend to spend more money than your kind of casual
and I was gonna
gamer.
do two Kickstarters, but there's a lot of rules about doing multiple Kickstarters, and quite frankly, doing a Kickstarter is so much freaking work and so exhausting that I couldn't do two. I just combined the two. I do D&D and Pathfinder at the same time. But don't be confused. Like, you know, we do both because I just kind of want to do both. I also want to, we do Pathfinder, but this way, it's a lot easier for us to convert Pathfinder to D&D than the other way. Other way around is an impossible nightmare.
Well, and I was going to say the other side of the coin is you do all this game design work, okay? And, you know, we'd like to live in this fantasy land that, you know, we'll release really great products for Pathfinder or for, I don't know, thirsty sword lesbians, and that's going to make all the 5th edition people just come over to our game. Yes, some percentage will, maybe not because of your product. The fact is, there's a lot of people who are playing 5th edition. They're going to keep playing 5th edition or D&D or oneD&D or whatever the hell it's called. And in a way, if you're making this great product, don't you want it to be in their hands?
Yeah, that's the other reason.
Like you did all this work and effort, and at a certain point, if you go, no, I'm only publishing it for my little system, that's being gatekeeping in a way, because you're basically saying you don't deserve these cool ideas, these cool monsters, these cool worlds, these cool adventures.
We're coming up with stuff that you literally, I mean we are also rare because I'm not like trumping our own horn, but we do put a lot of thought into coming up with concepts and ideas that other people aren't doing. I mean, I'm not like throwing anyone under the bus, but 90% of these Kickstarters are kind of the same. They're either for settings or monsters or magic items or spells or classes. And it's
they're good settings and monsters. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah, they're good. But we take risks, and we're doing things like Year of Monsters or Eldamon or Dragon, you know, a 130-page book on a dragon ancestry. And that's it. Which sells incredibly well, by the way, Mark. So people want that. I'm glad
my idea did well.
It did great.
Even I didn't have an idea to make it 130 pages. Stephen, I will say that was your idea to expand it to that size.
Yes, and people love this book. Here's the D&D version. And, you know, we wanted it so people can play a dragon, whether it's in D&D or Pathfinder. Or now, thirsty sword. If I could figure it out, I would do it.
Well, and ultimately, you know, I mean, the thing, and we talk about this a lot on our Knights of the Last Call Patreon and our Discord, is like, for us, it's very funny because so many of us, myself included, and so many of my patrons, you know, we are playing in a given week, we're playing Pathfinder 2. And then on Friday, I'm playing my own versioned hack of 5th edition and 5 Torches Deep, and I'm throwing in a bunch of other stuff in there. But then we'll also go play, you know, Powered by the Apocalypse game, or Blades of the Dark game, or a Dread game, or a Call of Cthulhu game. For us, it's funny because 5th edition and Pathfinder 2, it's like, those are kissing cousins. I mean, like, I mean, I'm like, oh, I was rolling D20s, and I had a strength score, and an int score, an armor class. It's like, I had some skills. I was proficient in some of them. I wasn't in others. Which game am I talking about? You don't know. It could be either, right? And so for me, it's like the games are so similar anyways. When people are like, oh, it's this or that, like, it's really funny. Like, if you want to contrast those games versus Powered by the Apocalypse, okay, fine. You can have your contention, because those are very different games. But I think Pathfinder 2 and D&D are very similar. You know, maybe if you're only living in that world of D&D and Pathfinder, they're very different.
Kissing cousins.
Yes, kissing cousins. Literally, you know how you know they're kissing cousins? Okay, never mind.
Oh, I want to hear. Oh, I want to hear now.
I was gonna say because they're genetically compatible, but then I was like, Because to your point, I think it would be harder to take some of your ideas and convert them to Genesis system convert them to any of these other systems, because it would use
that, like, some of the ideas that we have you could convert to other systems. They might not look the same.
But the idea could be the same. I mean, ultimately,
like,
that's,
you could do Eldamon in a lot of systems, and yes, in systems that don't have like robust rules heavy explanations of all of their spells and special abilities, it'll be a little trickier to decide what the Eldamon themselves are actually doing. But there's some elements of it that you could do anywhere.
By the way, we
looks like in chat there's someone, Derik, who called you on the characterization. He apparently did get the Battle Zoo Bestiary for 5e and decided to get the Pathfinder version, is now playing Pathfinder.
I said that there are likely it's Trey. Hey, what's going on, Trey? Trey's a patron of ours. But like there are some people out there, and that's awesome, and that's great. I mean, that's incredible. In fact, again, people should be playing more games, period. Like, if you went from 5e to Pathfinder 2, or you're just playing Pathfinder 2, and you're like, I have done my job. No, you haven't. Keep buying new systems. Keep buying new games.
Yeah, just play everything. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I tell you, now that I'm gotten older, and we, like, me and my friend told you, like, last week we talked about how we would get into these gargantuan fights, and now we don't even bother. We just don't, because it doesn't matter, let's just have fun, like who cares in the end? It's like, it's a game. Let's just have fun. We're more relaxed about it.
That being said, like I said, do I hate that D&D is cool now and do long-term? No, I think though, I would be lying to you if I said though that I do feel partially left behind, because like I said, I used to be the core demo, and I haven't changed. But now I am in the extreme edge of the demographic. And so I am no longer the target audience. And that can hurt. That can sting.
Yeah, there's a lot of people angry about She-Hulk, because they're like, how dare they? And I've seen, like, these people go on and on about, the comic book doesn't sell, blah, blah, blah. Right. Dude, you guys are, it's like, it's literally apples. It's not even apples and oranges. It's apples and like jet fighters. It's like, you guys aren't even you don't even know what you're arguing about. They don't care. Like Miss Marvel is a good example. Miss Marvel was by far the lowest rated Marvel show.
The little girl.
Yes, but it hit the 24 to 24 to 50 demo, and like destroyed that demo, which is a very weak demo for Disney. They don't care what the numbers were. They were hitting a demo, and they hit that demo. They did great for them. I mean, like you guys are having an argument over things like, it did terrible. That Disney didn't know what they were doing. Like, no, they knew exactly what they were doing. You're looking at the wrong data. And it's the same.
Like, older white men didn't watch it as much, but several demographics watched it more.
Right. Well, the demographics they were going after did watch it and talked about it, and that's what they wanted. And, back to what I was saying about geek culture, one of the most popular shows on television that's been on, let's see if you guys know. That's my dog's bark. 5 seasons. It is, I think, on AMC. It's one of the most popular shows by far. It has its own universe and several spin-offs that are doing so well that they're spin-offs of spin-offs now. Do you know what I'm talking about? I'll give you a little more hint. It stars Kevin Costner.
Oh, the Yellowstone?
Yellowstone brings in huge numbers. Way more than any of our geek shows do. Way more, to the point that they had spin-offs from the Yellowstone universe that did so well that they have spin-offs now of those spin-offs. And it is making a fortune for Paramount. Do you ever hear about Yellowstone? Do you ever see people arguing over Yellowstone? Do you see any YouTube channel, anything? No, not at all.
So what you're saying, Stephen, is I need to shut down Knights of Last Call.
Yes.
And go make Knights of Yellowstone.
You would be channel. You'd be way more profitable. I promise you. But the point is that just because it's mainstream doesn't mean, it has to be, quote, popular. It's like, there's a lot of things that are popular that are not mainstream at all. Like Yellowstone, I tell everyone that half my friends, people never even heard of it. I'm like, well, A, you're not the target demo. Right. And B, they don't care. That's the more important thing. It's like, yes, they would want you to watch it because they want as many people as possible to watch it. But, people are arguing over D&D and geekdom and blah, blah, blah. And you see, but yet they want those Yellowstone, there is 1883, that's the spinoff. They want those Yellowstone numbers. They want the 1883 numbers. That's what they want.
But I also think though, it's like, I think though there is still, because I was going to say is, obviously the demographic has changed. I'm getting older. The wider audience, regardless of age, is going to be more casual and mainstream, right? Rings of Power is a great example of this, as it to a certain extent, right? Where they're making a television show for everyone, not for someone who's read the Silmarillion.
Well, it's not even that; it's everyone in the world, because it's not the United States, which is, by the way, why The Witcher was made, because The Witcher is the Lord of the Rings of Europe, by the way.
So Lord of the Rings is a great example of that. You talk about how popular it was when the movies came out, 2001, 02, 03, loved them. But then it was like, so I meet someone and they'd really love them. And I'd be like, oh, well, if you love Lord of the Rings, like, have you read Lord of the Rings? Or I'd be like, oh, like, who's your favorite Valar? And they'd be like, what's a Valar? And I'd be like, oh, okay. A Valar is a choir of angel, like with a Maiar, like Gandalf. You know how Gandalf is not a human?
Yeah,
and they're like, Gandalf's not a human? Nope. And I'm like, no, he's a spirit. He's an angelic
like
spirit sent by Eru. Yeah, he's sent by Eru Iluvatar.
Yeah.
He's one of the Ashtari. And they're looking at me like, what are you speaking about? And I'm like, so it's like, there's a certain level though where like you have a choice in that point as me. Like you could be like, I'm irritated. Like you are stealing my fandom. Or you could say, and this is what usually happens. And then you got to live with this. You got to say, well, let me tell you all about the Ashtari. And then they go, no, I don't care about that.
Right. They don't care. They don't care.
They're like, I have a replica Sting on my wall and I have the deluxe Ultra Edition Blu-ray of Lord of the Rings. And I would put on my, Tinder profile that I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, but I actually don't care about any of that. And then you have two options. You can live with that, or you can get super indignant and be a pissy little child and go, they're not a real Lord of the Rings fan. And that's where those are your choices.
All right. We're stopping everything for $50 super chat.
Hey.
From
Hawaii.
I love Hawaii, by the way. I was only there once, but oh my God, I loved it. You want to read this one, Mark?
Sure. It says, just got a break from my duty watch to catch the stream. I won't be able to watch live. I look forward to the conversation on the way home. Keep up the good work. Love, Blake.
Thank you so much, Blake. Thank you for the super chat. It's very nice of you. Yeah. Well, duty watch in Hawaii. I mean, I guess you're stationed there. That's a nice place to be stationed, let me tell you. My dad was stationed in Biloxi, Mississippi. Not that nice.
Not that nice. We have a patron who's stationed in Hawaii as well. So that's kind of funny. Yes. Actually, I think, Regan Wolfbane gave us a super chat last week. So thank you, Regan Wolfbane. That's very nice.
Super nice.
Very nice of you.
Feel free to ask any questions. So I like Juno wrote, Lord of the Rings is the Lord of the Rings of Europe. That is true. But The Witcher is a good example of
thank you for saying that.
Incredibly, it's true. But The Witcher is fascinating because that is, I'd say, maybe the Wheel of Time of Europe. Like it's a very popular, incredibly, cultural impact fantasy novel series that had zero visibility in the United States. Zero. No one even heard of it. Even after the video games, like only the geeks knew about it. And then the Netflix comes out and it's one of the biggest shows in the world now. So are the people...
when the Netflix series came out, people were just like, oh, is that based on the video game?
I know. Right.
That's so good.
But it is interesting.
Because there are a lot of Netflix series that are, like, Castlevania and other stuff that are based on video games. So it's not an unreasonable assumption to make. Yeah. It's just that, like, I don't know, like, I haven't read the Witcher book
I never
series,
read I couldn't get into them.
I stopped partway through Witcher 1 because I didn't really like it that much. But
Yeah.
I knew that it was a book series.
Yeah, I tried to read the books. Witcher 1 is very interesting. It's a single player MMO, which is, I liked it a lot, actually. Witcher 1 is fascinating from a
Witcher
video game
1
point.
is a single player.
Did you just call it a
MMO?
single player MMO?
It is a single player MMO. Watch the review, Zero Punctuation. They also call it. It is, if you played it again today, it has all the looks and feels and trappings of an MMO, but it is single player. It's hard. It really is. Like in Zero Punctuation, when they reviewed it back in like 2009, it said the exact same thing. Because when you play it, it's like it's basically as all the MMO trappings of how quests work and the layout and design, but but you play by yourself. But
People
anyhow,
tell me I should skip to the later ones because they're better, but I always play in order and I don't want to skip any of the stories.
yeah,
so.
it's not an MMO in the sense of you're playing multiplayer. The designs of the quests and the game.
Gotcha. So you're wandering around, you go into a village, they say, we have a rat problem.
Exactly.
Can you go kill 15 of these things?
It was very interesting when it came out.
But yeah, so, you know, I think, you know, going back to like the Lord of the Rings thing, this was an example of where suddenly Lord of the Rings was everywhere. There were posters, there were action figures, there were swords, there were replicas, and the fandom exploded.
Yep.
But what I defined as the fandom of Lord of the Rings was, who's your favorite Valar? And so,
oh my God,
when people
such a you win geekdom, you win.
So when people, you know, when people didn't know that, it's natural to feel indignant. And so I think that's kind of what's happening now with D&D. It's the people who say they're diehard D&D fans, but they've like never played D&D, you know, or it's the people who you know, are buying $150 sets of dice, but they don't own a player's handbook. It's like this weird kind of like where you almost feel like I had to pay my dues.
Oh yeah,
you know, I was in it when you had to scrape to find a new product release, and when it wasn't cool, and we didn't have all this cool stuff on Kickstarter, and so it's natural to feel like, you know, a degree of hate, like. I want you to suffer too. I had to suffer to get into this hobby. You should have to suffer too. Why is it so easy for you? And
I think that like the who's your favorite Valar may be similar to like what's your favorite like first edition D&D module with a letter and number code on it.
Right,
it's
exactly.
Like, you know, some people do play a lot or do get into the fandom without getting in the same way. Right. I bet you're talking about someone who maybe owns the movies and doesn't watch them or pay attention to or hasn't read the books and saying that they're a fan. But there probably are Lord of the Rings fans who spend hundreds of hours on it who don't know who their favorite Valar is.
Correct.
Anyway.
Right.
It's a different way of engaging with the medium. Maybe they make tons of cosplay and they're like deeply into the cinematography of the movies and they've read the trilogy, but not the Silmarillion because it's ridiculously boring.
But here's
love it.
So they don't know about
that.
But no, I think, Mark, you're absolutely right, because I think what you have to understand is that the hobby, what Lord of the Rings used to be 3 books. You know, it was really just one book that the publisher separated into 3, but it was one book. And then there was a couple different things, right? And that was it. So the spectrum of the hobby was fairly tight. But it became popular, it grew. Now there is a wide spectrum of what fandom means for this particular property. And the same thing's true with Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering used to very much mean one specific thing. But now you have people interacting with that brand on a whole different spectrum and scope. Well, the same thing's true at TTRPGs. And even though they've been around longer than Magic the Gathering, it took them a while, right? And then once they found their footing, now the brand of what a role-playing game fan is this very wide ranging spectrum. And we just have to accept that some people are going to interact, as you said, with the brand at different points and at different layers.
So actually, okay, I got a few things I wanted to talk about, Derik. First of all, we are about to also see Magic the Gathering, which is a very fascinating experience to see how this happens. Because the thing about D&D is that we saw the rules go through 5 iterations, or 6 really, or 7 if you really want to get crazy. You count AD&D, or you go Battle Chain, you go 9. Anyhow, there's a lot of additions.
Count like all 3.5 and 3.0 and 40
separate.
essentials.
Yes, right.
Like,
right.
It may have gone through quite a lot.
Quite a 5, but we'll say 5. Really 6. Okay, 6 plus D&D and AD&D. Okay, 7 additions, and each one is different. But Magic the Gathering, except for them getting rid of interrupts and sort of changing, some of the rules slightly, has more or less stayed the same in the last 30 years. It's mostly the same game, to the point that you can use cards from 30 years ago and they still work today. The point is that they have changing very slowly, but they are starting to change Magic the Gathering. I just read a very long article about how the Pro Tour is no longer rewarding pros like they used to, and is now very much becoming open to newbies and trying to get new people into the hobby and into the tournament scene.
I saw that one too, the Polygon one.
Yeah,
right?
the Polygon. Yep, it was all about Polygon. It was very interesting, and that is fascinating because that is, what they're also doing with D&D. Like they are very carefully, very quietly trying to make the hobby open to everyone, and they're trying to get rid of the stigma and trying to get rid of the gatekeeping, so that, especially for Magic. Okay, D&D is one thing because D&D is like been in popular culture, it's part of the vernacular, everyone's heard of it. Magic the Gathering, now 30 years around, makes a ton of money. I think way more than D&D does, but yet it's still only a very small number of people played, Magic, but they spent a ton of money on it. They must be sitting there thinking, if we could get Magic to these D&D numbers, we'd be making tens of billions.
You mean D&D to the Magic numbers?
No, Magic to the number of people.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that play D&D.
Well, I think that ultimately, though, it's an impossible dream, because the reason you can get D&D to so many people is that you don't need to buy that much stuff to play D&D, whereas you need to.
Yeah, but when Magic
almost need to be the person who's
not
dropping
true.
tons of
Magic's
money on
free.
it to play Magic.
Magic is more popular on its cell phone game than anywhere else by far.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
It's not even close. And that's where they're going to make all their money by far.
And I'll give you a great example. As someone who used to play semi-competitively pro Magic the Gathering, I remember when they released some new cards in Standard that really sucked, and they were having to ban everything, and then the Pro Tour got canceled, and I was like, "This
Which
is
edition was that?" I'm just curious.
The Pro Tour got canceled.
Well, they got it. Not the COVID Pro Tour. Was this before?
The Pro Tour had gotten shut down. It had become the Mythic Championship, where they basically gave out. They had the 60 people that they gave the money to, and I was like, this is the death of Magic. Like going to Grand Prix and everything like that. And I was like, and they're ruining the sets. They're coming out with infinite more sets per year, because they're coming out with special editions and secret layers, and they're bringing in IPs. For example, there's a Warhammer. There's a Warhammer 40K coming out.
Who. They're good. They're good. You're going to be seeing.
And I was sitting there. I
guarantee you're going to be seeing like Candyland before you know it.
I was like, the sky is falling. And you know what? All the casual Magic players, the Commander players who were just sitting there buying their products they didn't give a shit. They never watched the Pro Tour anyways. They don't care, right? Like that's just not anything about it. And it's something that I think gets talked about a lot, and I think needs to be reiterated. We are hearing, whether it's in this chat, on this platform of YouTube, Reddit, Twitter, whatever, you are hearing the loudest, craziest, zaniest, most passionate, most angry, most upset people that exist. The vast majority of people who interact with this hobby, particularly D&D, do not. They're like, "What's oneD&D?" They don't even know. They went to their
have no idea.
They bought a player's handbook a year and a half ago and some dice, and they've never interacted with the brand ever again. They just don't know.
I've been talking to a lot of D&D players recently. None of them, almost none of them have ever played, forget about Pathfinder, any other game. And they don't know. They know very little about the hobby, the industry, the history. I mean, none of them never heard of TSR. It's like none of them have ever heard of that.
Pathfinder players generally played several games and are kind of more cosmopolitan in terms of number of different games they've played. And D&D players, because it's not because being a D&D player makes you less likely to play games, it's because D&D is so good at acquisition that by necessity many of the players of D&D have not played any other games, because they have just been acquired by D&D from people who didn't play any tabletop RPGs. So it's like, if you think about it, logically it's pretty obvious why that's true. But you're absolutely right, Stephen, which is that a high percentage of 5e players, that's the one tabletop RPG.
Yeah, when
that
we
they
talked,
play.
remember we talked to Ginny D, and she was very interested in other games because all she's ever played is D&D, and and she's interested to know how other games work. But that's what she knows. Now we talked to Anto. He is interested because we're watching him in real time. If you watch his channel, of him discovering Pathfinder, and he's now doing videos about how Pathfinder works compared to D&D, and it's blowing his mind. I love watching these videos. He's like, can you believe this? And I'm like, wow, you're actually seeing it. Someone who literally got into the hobby, became hardcore enough to start their own channel and a monthly magazine on D&D, started to play Pathfinder only a few months ago, and is now, their eyes have been opened.
So to be fair with Anto, he was in the hobby before 5e and was playing other RPGs, right?
Oh,
like
I
Pathfinder
think so.
1.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm pretty sure he was playing Pathfinder 1 and some other RPG, so he's not
but he didn't get serious.
he's not your stereotypical
No, you're right.
It's because of the fact that there's so many acquisitions player who came into the hobby from 5e. But you are right, he had never played Pathfinder 2nd and had been going really all into 5e.
Yeah, it's very difficult for me because I liken this to my mother. Okay.
Okay, you want to get on the couch and tell me about it?
And every year, mostly obviously COVID. Every year I go with my mom and we go on a cruise around Mother's Day, and that's her Mother's Day gift. Okay, I love my mom; she's great. But my mom is a salt of the earth lady. You know, she likes what she likes, and so every time we go on the cruise, they have these incredible restaurants, these amazing places, Indian food, Italian food, whatever, what have you, and these incredible restaurants, whatever food. And every time we go on, I go, Mom, do you want to go? This place has this amazing insert cuisine here restaurant. Would you like to go to that? And she goes, no, I just want to go to the buffet and I just want to get my cheeseburger and my fries. And I think, and and I go, don't you want to try something new? And she says, well, I'm afraid I won't like it. But most importantly, I really like a burger and fries.
You like what you like.
Right?
Yeah.
You like what I like. And I go, and we have this conversation every year. But you won't know unless you try.
Yeah.
And it's this kind of chicken and egg problem, right? Because on one hand, it's like, well, that's what you like, and you are entitled to like what you like. But on the other hand, you don't know until you try it. Well, and so it's this, and that's how I feel about games. That's how I feel about board games. It's how I feel about tabletop role-playing games. It's how I feel about people who are playing Magic the Gathering. It's like, who am I to critique you on what you like? But at the same time, realize that you have only been exposed to a very narrow percentage of everything that this hobby has to offer.
Yeah, but that's like, so I'm big into food, and one of the easiest ways to get people to try new foods.
Food made me big, so that's my opposite thing.
Is that there you go. Is that I had a friend of mine who would buy Parmesan cheese. Now, I mean, like the worst Parmesan, like the ones that are like the Kraft crap.
Oh, yeah. The Kraft and the green can.
The green can.
Yeah.
And I couldn't take it anymore. So I got freshly grated Parmesan cheese, which you can get anywhere. And I'm like, let me show you something. And I was like, close your eyes, now taste this, and gave him a small spoon of freshly grated Parmesan cheese, and he ate it. And I'm like, okay, how's that? He goes, oh, it's delicious. I'm like, okay, now taste this. And it was literally the same Parmesan cheese out of his refrigerator, and he ate it and spit it out because it was so gross. And I'm like, that is what you have been eating for the last 10 years. And he's like, oh my God, because until you get a comparison, you don't know what you're missing.
Right.
And that's actually a good way to get people to try, quote, better food or like
But that's just the thing, right? Like, is it real? Is it better? Like, it's tough. It's a tough situation.
Well, for food, you can tell what's better. Trust me, that definitely.
Well, are you guys familiar with the Feynman restaurant problem?
Maybe.
No.
It's almost exactly the thing
what
Derik is talking about here. You have a restaurant. It has a certain number of items are on the menu, and you do not know which of those items you're going to like the best
Right.
out of the things that are on the menu, and you're going to eat a certain number of meals there.
Correct.
How
Yep.
can you try to strategically, like, what's the best strategy for getting a meal that is like the best possible number of meals that you're going to eat there? Like, do you just stick with it if you find one that you really like?
Right.
That's one that you found so far. Or do you try to
Mark, I think you just decided. I think you also just described dating and marriage.
I think you just described life. No, isn't that like a split
But
sort
in this
or
case,
something?
it actually is described as a restaurant-based problem, and so
you do what I do.
There is
Actually,
a solution where you want to.
I know the solution. Maybe.
Oh, what is the solution?
You do family style, so you get to try as much as possible.
So the normal mathematical solution is, say that you're going to go to the restaurant 100 times. You try a number of new dishes equal to the square root of basically 200, the square root of 202, that quantity minus 1, and then after that you just stick with the best one that you found. It's the square root of 2 times the number of times you're going to the restaurant plus 2 minus 1. But a lot of people just stick with the first thing that they've got if they like it. And so they have not chosen the mathematical optimal solution.
What we do
of trying the square root of 2 times the number of. So
I
if you
try
count, like, in your
everyone's
life how many
food.
role-playing game sessions you're going to have.
Right. You should play at least.
Decide that, I'll probably, if I'm playing once a week in a role-playing game, that's like about 50 per year, because I won't be able to play every time. And maybe I'll be able to play for 40 years until various reasons prevent me to. So you may have 2,000, right? So that means that the square root of 4,002, which is
I want to know this number.
minus 1, 62. The mathematically best way to do it is to try 62 different role-playing games for your first 62 sessions. And then whatever one of them you like best, you can play that moving onward.
Okay. Well, I know what I like.
Obviously, this doesn't work in real life, but that is
okay.
No, but I think it's. I think what you're grasping onto here, though, is a bit of what long-term fans don't like about D&D now, is that you have people who are entering the hobby through very different channels than where people traditionally entered the hobby, and so they've not gone through the same. We'll call them rites of initiation that other people have, right? They don't have that same, how dare you don't know what TSR is? You don't know who Gygax and Arneson are? Like you blasphemer, you heretic. In reality, that has nothing to do with the game. But I do think that there's a sense that, and maybe this is also part of it, D&D used to be a culture into itself, and like, in some ways, maybe people feel like, you mentioned, do they hate that D&D is cool now? D&D, like you said before, it's now mainstream. And that kind of also means that D&D, it doesn't have a culture anymore. And so maybe there's this sense of loss that these new folks who have come into the game from a different channel, they're not real players.
Yeah, that happens all the time. That happens with anything, though.
I think that happens with anything, though. Right?
I mean, okay.
That's the fair weather fan problem, right?
I was about to say that's a fair weather fan. Like, I have been a Met fan since I was a kid.
Right.
Well, guess what? The last year, Mets have become cool. By the way, Mets professional baseball team just clinched the playoffs last night.
But no one here knew that. No,
I know. Well, you never know. But the point is that I have had season tickets for 30 years. Okay. I have seen them. I actually gave a talk on this and how being a Yankee fan is easy because they always win. It's easy. Being a Met fan is hard. It's like being a Browns fan, man. It is hard because you got to go through hell to be a fan like that. Now they're good. Now they're great. In fact, they're probably going to be good forever because the owner is like the richest man, one of the richest men in the world. So they're always going to be good. And people are jumping on that bandwagon left and right. Does that make me upset?
Okay.
A little. A little.
Yeah.
It makes me a little upset.
I'll take another one. I apologies for folks for the sports metaphor.
I know.
But you're a baseball fan through and through, right? And so obviously you appreciate, and I've always heard, this is true, you could tell me, that you could tell the difference between a real baseball fan a real baseball fan,
Yeah, well, no,
and a casual fan. A
Yes.
real baseball fan looks at a game, box score 1-0, and
Yes.
says, "What a great game!" Right, like final score.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yes, many
Right, like a
times.
pitcher's duel, right, so to speak, right? That, but a fair weather, like a casual fan's like, it was 19-17, right? There were 2 grand slams and 3 triples, and they love that game. Okay,
Yeah.
now you're a baseball fan. Pitch count, larger bases,
Yep.
banning the defensive shift. Right, they are making
Yes.
changes to the game to
Yep.
both increase the pace of play,
Yes.
and to encourage more base hits.
Yes.
Right, they wanted more
Correct.
offense in the game.
Yep.
Mitigating, minusing, subtracting
Yep.
strategy, tactics.
Wrong.
Right. Well, that's I'm not a baseball fan, so
Okay,
I'm
let's
only
let it
parroting what I'm
correct.
saying.
Okay.
But like the
That's
idea
not
that
correct, but-
today players take advantage of statistics to know those teams.
Yeah.
Oh, play over here. Long story short, it's going to increase run output.
Yes.
You being a purist to baseball, do you
Yes.
view that right? This is a move. This is a financial decision, right?
It's not.
To make the game
It
more
isn't, it's
appealing.
not. Let me tell you something about this. Actually, I could talk about this quite extensively. Mark could go to sleep right now. Every other sport. So this year they added a big rule, which is the designated hitter was added to National League, and that was a huge deal. And you know what they said is that they were saying, first of all, the National League was the only baseball professional sport in the entire world that still didn't have the designated hitter. Every other baseball in the entire world had designated hitter, including college, other countries, blah blah blah. As Derik goes to sleep. Here's the thing: all these other sports change the rules constantly. Hockey, football, basketball, they're constantly. Baseball never, ever changes the rules, and I mean never. You know what? The world has changed. The reason they're banning the shift is that they have computers now, and they have the ability to know exactly where you're going to hit the ball. So whenever they play, they have a little thing in their hat. They take off their hat or the glove, they look, and there's a little chart that says, when this person plays, stand here, because there's a higher chance of them hitting the ball in that location than anywhere else. And it has basically been killing the game because no one is getting hits. So because technology has changed and the ability to, sort of, I don't know if you call it cheat, but make the game not as interesting,
right?
You have to then change the rules. But you know what? Football does this every year. Basketball does this. Hockey does that. Hockey changed the rules on the crease 1,000 times because of the way scoring was working. So you know what? Baseball.
It looks like MLB changed the rules 60 times. I was curious if they never changed the
That's
rules.
60
Like,
times
never,
in over.
ever. No, I
No,
mean,
but in
ever.
100 years. No, they changed the rules, but like
No,
football,
you're right. It is over
changes,
100 years that they only changed it 60 times. That is
football
pretty
changes
much.
60 rules a year. I mean, they change. That's like, look how many times football has changed the rules. Seriously, basketball. Wilt Chamberlain broke the game of basketball that they had to institute over 100 new rules because of one person. Think about that. That's
It's also
how
worth
good he
noting
was.
that there were only 12 changes, it looks like, since 1988 in
Yeah,
baseball.
12.
And they came in 5 sets of changes.
Yeah,
So if
and
you
they're
consider
very
one of
minor.
the sets
All right.
to be like one change.
Not to go off topic. Well, not to go off topic, but to go back on topic. I just didn't want to lose this though.
Yeah.
But we're talking about baseball. But Ragon Wolfbane, who generously to super chatted $50, did have a really interesting point, and I do agree with this. So I will say this: I think this point of, dare I call it, vitriol is warranted. He said, "I've tried to host Pathfinder Second Edition, Root, Legend of the Five Rings at my local game store. I get no interest, but." D&D, I'm assuming he means when he runs Dungeons & Dragons, or they run Dungeons & Dragons, usually has an overflow. It makes wanting to try systems hard because why invest in what you cannot play? And that is, I think, the real price that the monolithic success of D&D being cool now does cost us.
Yeah. I mean, that is, but so many more people are in the hobby. And you know what? If you want to find people who like Root, you can. It's just going to be harder. But you know what? Go back. Well, now I'm gatekeeping. Go back 20 years ago. Find anyone who will play D&D. Good luck.
Right.
Good luck. You know,
Right.
like, okay, I'll give you an example. I don't want to get in trouble here because we've changed since then. When we first launched Roll for Combat 5 years ago, it was all men. And some people were upset that we didn't have any women on the show.
Mm.
And the reason was that, first of all, this is my long-term group. Oh, thanks, Daniel. Next is, I literally didn't know any women who played Pathfinder back in 5 years ago. I didn't know anyone, and I wasn't trying
There were
to be.
a lot. They probably just weren't in your circle.
They weren't in my circle.
It
No.
makes sense
I
because
said
of
I
your
didn't know.
right.
I
demographic,
didn't know. Right.
Yeah.
And I went out of my way to meet Vanessa and to meet Lauren and to meet, many other people who play Pathfinder. Now we have quite a range of people on our shows and our authors, and we try to be as, inclusive as possible. I wasn't trying to be exclusive. I just didn't know anyone, It's like, that's just how I grew up. I was happy to find anyone who played Pathfinder, and people were angry that I wasn't playing with women back then. I'm like, you don't understand. I don't know any, or at least back then I didn't. It's like, I'm not trying to be exclusive. That's just the way I grew up. And nowadays, when people, that's when I told you, when all my friends saw the D&D trailer, they were happy just to have a D&D trailer. They're like, they're on the other end. They're like, yeah, they get it. They're like, yeah, we had to cut our chops and go through hell and high water and like go through, oh my God, the things I would used to do to play Magic the Gathering back in like Legends. Like, we would have to find a game that was like 2 hours away and get up early Sunday morning and drive there.
Well,
And
right.
like,
But that's what I'm saying. You had a more sense of
it was hard.
Maybe appreciation.
Yeah.
I don't know. Because William asked, back to the coolness of D&D. Did D&D being niche actually help promote experimentation in other games? And I believe so.
Oh God, yeah.
And
I tried everything back then.
Yeah, Joe said yes. Joe Castle said yes. During the 80s, when D&D was niche, my group played a dozen different games. And I'll tell you why. This is something I saw, and I don't remember if I saw it on Facebook or Reddit, but someone said something. Again, this is herd of a herd, but it's a one-time thing. But I think it's a meaningful quote. Someone was like talking to somebody about playing something else. It might have been Pathfinder 2. And the person said, I don't want to play role-playing games. I want to play D&D. And I think that mentality is true, because I think in the 80s, you were a role play gamer. You know what I mean? Like,
you were a gamer. You weren't even role playing.
You were a gamer. You wanted to be part of this hobby. I think nowadays you do have a larger presence. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot more people, right? Rising tide lifts all boats. There's more serious invested gamers as well. Mm-hmm. But I think that you have a lot of people who aren't interested in playing role playing games. They just want to be part, the same people who don't care what the house words of House Baratheon are or House Lannister are. They just wanted to be part of the cool group that got together every Sunday and watched Game of Thrones, right? Like, they don't. Yeah. Their fandom is surface
well, let me
deep.
ask you a question. That's actually interesting, because we were just talking before this about George R.R. Martin. So Game of Thrones, the first book, I picked it up in 1993,
long time
94.
ago, yeah.
And the reason I picked it up is because on the back cover was a quote. So don't tell me those don't work. From George R.R. Martin, who said this was like the best book he ever read. I was like, oh, I got to read this book. And then I picked
George
it up.
R. Martin wrote a
Not George R. Martin. Not Brandon Sanderson.
Robert Jordan.
Robert Jordan did the sandwich quote.
That's why I picked up Game of Thrones.
There you go. Oh my God, it totally worked. It totally worked.
I also did not like Game of Thrones.
That's why.
Stopped reading.
That's also why I picked up Game of Thrones.
Oh, we all did. Wow, it really worked. Oh my God. Well, the point is,
those author quotes work.
Oh my God, did that work? Anyhow, I picked up that book, read it, and then read all those books. So when they announced Game of Thrones, and it blew up to the level that obviously it did.
Yeah.
Did that upset you? Because like, I was there from the beginning. I
didn't mind.
Yeah, I didn't care at all. In fact, I was happy. I told all my friends to watch it.
I didn't care either, but I'll tell you this. Yeah. My investment in Game of Thrones is like here, whereas my investment in something like role-playing games is much, much higher, right?
I suppose that's true. I do want to point out that the idea that it was so easy to find niche indie RPG tables back in the day, and now it's harder because of 5e is really rose-colored glasses, as far as I'm concerned. I've been online for a long time. Obviously, I was not online in the 80s, and I have very little knowledge of what the whole worldwide network of games looked like back then. But
was on the internet.
as long as I've been able to see what people are saying, people have always been complaining that it's harder to find tables of the niche RPG that they wanted to play than it is of D&D. That's been perennial.
I will say this, where you live.
I think it depends on where you live, because I will say my anecdotal evidence is that back in the day, I would say probably not even, this is not even a 5e thing. I would say that before the OGL and third edition, in like the 90s, if you went into a game store, it was almost like in the 90s, because gaming was so niche, you had people who were trying to be niche within that niche. We don't play D&D, we play Vampire, we play GURPS. And now, because it's just not cool, it's like back in the day, it was like you wanted to be special within your specialized group. But now it's just like you have people who go, look, we don't care about this. I just want to just, get together and play D&D. And I think what I wanted to say was, I think you're also starting to see now, before I was a demo, and then I got pushed over to here. But now I think you're seeing that a lot of people who came into the hobby with 5th edition, or, were fairly new to the hobby, and then really 5th edition, they would say, is their edition, right? They started playing, they got really into it. Now they're starting to feel a bit marginalized as the game continues to grow and push towards the middle. I've seen a lot of people complaining, and again, the people online tend to be the more invested people, like about the about the more recent Spelljammer book, because they're like, where's the rules? Where's the rules for ship combat and stuff? Yeah. And they're like, the book is basically like, it's just DM story time, hang out, talk, tell exciting space adventures with your friends. And like now there's a group of Dungeons and Dragons players who are almost starting to feel the same pinch away as the game shifts away.
I'm gonna do. Wait, do you want to do one D&D prognostication?
Prognostication.
I miss. That's
that MIT money.
I know.
Steven.
I know. There you go. MIT guy gave you that. So much for my vocabulary being good. I'm good at understanding things, just not saying them. I guess that because someone wrote it here, it's like, why would somebody want to buy and learn? Oh my god, I'm taking it out. Oh, look at this 600-page rule book. Look at the size of this monster. If I went to you,
she's a chunker.
I'd be like, hey, do you want to play a game? Just read this book.
By the way, there's a rule for everything.
Look at this book. This thing is insane. This is insane. It's like, are you nuts? Are you insane? Who would do that? I guarantee that what we saw with the latest D&D release, where it was like 3 96-page books, that is what D&D 1 is going to be. We're going to have the player's handbook. There's no way that player's handbook is more than 100 pages. That thing is going to be 96 pages. The DM's guide, 96 pages. All those books are going to be less than 100 pages. Yeah. Now, there's going to be more of them, okay? There's going to be a whole bunch of them, but there's no way those books are going to be that big anymore. They're just not. They're going to have spells in a different book. They're going to have... It's just going to be very streamlined, and because they want people to jump in and play right away. And you see this, no way. No way is that happening. And that is also going to piss off the D&D people, because the Spelljammer, that pissed off a ton of people. Oh my god, were people angry about that one.
It really did.
Yeah.
I mean that was pretty universal, disclaiming that it was not a very good product.
Yeah.
But
because it was so simplified, and people wanted meat. They wanted crunch, and they got fluff galore in those books.
Correct.
And guaranteed that we're going to be seeing more and more and more fluff.
But that's what I'm saying. I think that is a direction that the game is going to continue to go. And so now you're going to have this group of people who really came into 5th edition during, let's say, the 2015 to 2020 era, who grew up with the game with, oh, this is my multi-Sorlock paladin. He can get advantage, and then he can smite, and then he can do another smite with his smite using the smite spell, and then he could do... And he's got advantage to counteract the -10 from the Great Weapon Mastery, and then he has Divine Thing to get a +10, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, yeah. And then they're going to get a book out where it's just like, well, describe how your paladin feels about the situation, and the GM will make the appropriate determination about whether you hit or not. And they are going to lose their mind because they're going to say, what is this game that I play?
The D&D is never going to go all the way narrative.
Mark, just give it 20 years, Mark.
I have a feeling they're not, because of oneD&D, and they're going to turn it into a video game narrative interactive storytelling thing.
Yeah, that's a technical term, but I agree with you.
No, but you know what I mean? Like, they're never going to take out, well, because you need conflict, and combat is the greatest conflict when it comes to storytelling. And it's totally in the DNA. So I completely agree with Mark. It'll never go completely narrative, but it is fascinating that all their adventures are now, you don't need to ever do combat if you don't want to. And that's like the first thing they say in their advertising. Like, that is like, it's not, oh, we have new classes, or we have new magic items, or we have new abilities. No. It's, you could play this whole thing as a pacifist. And you know what? A lot of people like that. In fact, to the point that those are their best-selling adventures of
people
all
like
time.
it the most if it's kind of there seems to be a presumption of conflict, but there's a way to do a peace run on it, because then that also feels like a special achievement when you do the pacifist run.
Well, I've
like
also
Undertale.
Yeah, Wild Behind. This is it. This is the one. They're one of the best-selling adventures of all time. Is the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and you don't ever have to fight in this if you don't want to.
Well, but that that even sort of reflects being sort of a part of this internet community has sort of given me a little bit more perspective than I normally would have, and so I get exposed to a lot of opinions. And one of the things that I see a lot from certain DMs is this concern that combat scares them in their role playing game. This is true for 5th edition particularly, but it's even true for Pathfinder 2. Combat scares them. And the reason why combat scares them is because they go, but wait, isn't there a chance that someone could die? And
you're 100% right.
What about their arc? Like, what about their, like,
yes.
I have this plan for this character over the next 20 levels. And people they're like, wait a second, combat's a problem for me. Because that is introducing a level of potential volatility that I cannot accept. Well, don't worry, the
monsters are all becoming nerfed.
That's my kind of my point.
I mean, that is a playstyle, though, and you're right, Derik. I've come across people who I've either met or discussed with online who do get anxiety when the fight is challenging enough that it makes you use tactics or use the resources you have at your disposal to win. And ultimately, just like in Steven's group that he talked about, those half pacifists and half murder hobos, a group that are half get anxious if there's any even presumption of challenge, versus a group that's half wants to have fun by using tactics and their abilities cleverly or in a strategic way to win something that had at least a veneer of challenge. Those two are going to just never be able to play together and not have one side have to sacrifice for the other, because the times when the people who have fun when it's got a little challenge and they have to work it out strategically only have fun at the times when the people are feeling anxious because, oh my gosh, no, it's challenge, there's tension, and they didn't want that. So ultimately, there's so many things people love about tabletop role-playing games that they may have to form separate groups. And it's just like we were saying before, Derik, there are so many ways for people to love Lord of the Rings now.
Right.
It's not just your favorite Valar. There's just tons of ways to get into the hobby.
Aule, by the way.
It's true about game styles. So I think that just as we've been saying since the beginning, it's only a small subset of long-term fans that really hate that D&D is cool now. It's not most of the long-term fans, but some.
In case you were wondering, by the way, for the people at home, it's Aule the Smith made the dwarves. It's my favorite Valar.
Oh my god.
Oh, okay.
Anyways.
Well, there you go.
Well, everyone give us 50 likes and we can find out what his least favorite is. We can have him rank.
Poor.
Okay, no. Oh, you go give it away for free. So if we get 50 likes, we'll have Derik go through every aspect of Lord of the Rings with us. In fact, do you have where's my Lord of the Rings book here?
I have a couple One Rings RPGs.
Do you?
I have.
Do you have the new one? The new one's pretty good. I want to play it. I do want to try it. The rules are gorgeous. Yeah, you have it.
I don't have a favorite Valar, but I've decided it's Telemektar, son of Tulkas.
Oh my god!
Leah.
Oh my god! You guys
because I couldn't find any information about that
geeks.
person other than their name, and so I figure it's the most niche, right?
You know my favorite is.
For this episode, that's the right person.
I can tell you what my favorite is. It's
Stop.
I don't. Okay, you're right.
Even I don't know what they are. I literally just Googled and found the one that had the least information about it.
That's cheating. I can't Google while we're playing. So.
Well, there you go. You just don't have the.
I'm not cool enough. Well, no, because otherwise it messes up the stream. So.
Oh yeah, that would be a problem.
But
it actually does.
yeah, but you know, I think what you saw recently. I saw this. Someone there was a little bit of tongue in cheek going on in my Patreon, but you know, the Critical Role episode. I don't want to do any spoilers, but it's 2 weeks ago. I guess spoiler alert. If you haven't seen the Critical Role and your eyes have been shut and you've had your head in the ground, so if you're watching this, that's your warning. Spoiler alert. 2 weeks ago or whatever, Critical Role had a number of deaths, and you know, people on the Reddit, on the Critical Role Reddit, were losing their minds. There was even some articles where they're like, "What have they done? What was Matt Mercer thinking?" And like, people in the Critical Role were really legitimately upset because they were like, "Wait, that's not fair. What about that character's arc? That character, that player had expressed so many cool ideas for their character, and I wanted to see them do X and Y and Z, and what about this other thing that's going to just get left unresolved? How could Matt let this happen?" Was like a very common refrain. Like, even to the point where I remember one post that was like, "I thought Matt was a good GM. How could he let this happen?" Like, that is a very alien mindset to me. But for a lot of people, that's the level on which they are interacting with the hobby. And yeah, I mean, I think Strat said a point, and yet it's like 2 people had diamonds. So like, everyone but one, I think, got resurrected or raised dead anyways. But point is, combat and this volatility and random chance, those are anathema in some ways, right? I play role-playing games because I don't want to know what's going to happen. And I think a lot of people are starting to play role-playing games because they do know what they want to have happen. And they just kind of want to see it happen. Dice are the enemy of that. Random chance is the enemy of that.
Yeah, no, there's 2 things of all those products I know. I think if they can go back, that they would get rid of death in D&D. And in Magic the Gathering, they would get rid of the mana component. The
mana screw and mana flood is that I love it because of the strategic nature of it.
They would get rid of that.
It is the number one thing that brings that game down, because
by far.
You sit down to play Magic the Gathering, you're exciting, you're gonna have spells, you're gonna have creatures, you're gonna be doing combat, and then you draw 7 land and you do nothing and get killed.
To your baseball analogy, do I mind them changing the rules? No, because I think the time has come where the rules should be changed. And in fact, everyone I know who hated.
How into Magic are you, though?
Me,
Steven?
Very. Like, heavily into Magic. I want me to bring on my.
So that therefore disproves Derik's theory that maybe the people who are less invested, like he was into Song of Ice and Fire, are more likely to not care about rules changes.
Well, I even think the game would be more enjoyable and no one would know the difference if they made mana consistent, had like mana as its own deck, which most games do now. Like, almost all games have mana or something like mana just build naturally,
right.
Like,
so you could draw from the mana deck,
right,
or just get rid of lands as a thing and just be like, either draw or increase
Well,
your mana.
yeah,
I mean,
right, right.
again,
Of
right.
the
Well, no,
color you want.
Magic the Gathering came out, and it was the first, and then very quickly other games,
Right,
including
right.
Wizards of the Coast's own game called Hecatome, which was like their second
remember
big
that,
CCG.
yeah.
Mm.
Basically, any card once per turn, you could take any. There were no land cards. Once per turn, this is how World of Warcraft worked as well.
Mhm.
TCG.
Mhm.
Any card could be played in upside down in your mana zone, and so like a red spell or a red creature played upside down in your mana zone became essentially a red land or a mountain, and that way by definition you always had a handful of spells, you couldn't flood, and et cetera, et cetera.
Right,
So
yeah, and I think, quite frankly, I think the game would be better for it.
Okay, I'm a Magic the Gathering snob. I love building mana bases. I love figuring out the math of it and the percentages, you know, the same way that like people, you know, well, you had 1,000 at bats and on a right pitch, but I completely agree with you. I think the game would be better for it. And I played Hecatome. I was one of the 5 people that did.
I have a Hecatome deck in my closet over there, actually, believe it or not.
So, but I played Hecatome. It only had 2 expansions, and I loved the game because they basically said, yeah, okay, well, now that we've had Magic the Gathering out for about 5-6 years, we kind of see how we would do things differently. And this is like a fresh start for us. And they did, and the game never caught on. There was a lot of problems with it, logistical, but it was, in my opinion, a vastly superior game. So.
But anyhow, the point is that I think because, and back to what I was saying before, because there's been so many editions of D&D and how D&D has evolved, especially 5th edition, which is so different than 3rd and 4th edition, that quote oneD&D is going to be even softer. And I think that's why people are angry, is that the mainstream has now made D&D less difficult and makes death like almost non-existent, to the point of view when you were saying about I mean, I don't watch Critical Role, but like people are losing their minds, you know, and that's fascinating. I guarantee everyone at WotC is taking notes. Like, forget about the playtest. Screw the playtest. That they already figured out what the game's going to be. That's just like kind of marketing fluff.
It is marketing.
It's totally marketing. Them watching this and seeing the reactions, that they're taking notes, and that they're being very, very fascinated to what's going on there. I guarantee it. And I wouldn't even be surprised if they talked to Mark beforehand and had those deaths maybe planned. Just saying.
Well, right, but I mean, and obviously, you mean Matt, not Mark.
Matt.
Yeah,
sorry.
but
I
outside,
guarantee they didn't talk to me about
you know what I mean.
I love the idea that Critical Role is putting in a call to Mark Seifter. Hey, we're thinking about some deaths tomorrow. Can you give me some thoughts on it?
No, it's
like,
planned.
well,
It's
you know,
planned.
Pathfinder,
It's
we have
planned
a lot of
way
deaths, so-
further ahead of
No,
that.
but and that's okay. But and that's fine. That's Critical Role. It's a show. It's an entertainment value. They've got literally hundreds of thousands of viewers. Like, that's fine for them. But for the average dungeon master, who is sitting at home with their group of people who are really invested into the character, as I said before, if you're a dungeon master for Pathfinder 2 or for 5th edition, the most horrifying experience in your whole life can be like that 2nd or 3rd session when a player shows up and they're really excited because they just got from Fiverr the commissioned art for their character, and they bought brand new dice to match the color scheme and the feel. My Dwarven Barbarian, I went with these silver iron dice that are flecked with amethyst that reflect the gemstones of their homeland. And they sit down at your table, and you're sitting here going, okay, well, I guess I can never kill that character because that person's out $200. Right now, I would do that because 1, I'm a harshless bastard, and 2, because my players would know to expect that, and 3, I probably think it's very funny.
Probably get a bunch of people to pledge for the death of that dwarf, and then like
I can make it
check to the guy playing the dwarf.
Yeah, just cut a check. But for your standard DM who's only been DMing for a couple of years, or maybe it's their first year DMing, that is such a tough thing to ask for somebody, you know. So now someone shows up with a wormwood dice tray that matches their character. They got a custom miniature made on Hero Forge, designed to look exactly like their miniature, and they paid the $55 to get it printed in heroic scale with full coloring. They show up at your session with the custom dice and the art, the Fiverr art, and you're going to go, holy shit, I am so nervous now because tonight there's a severe encounter versus a blood ooze and plague stone, and there's no way anyone is going to survive that. So like it's or those damn wolves from earlier in the adventure. But like the point is, that's a really tough sell for a lot of game masters. And so what do game masters do in that situation? I mean, I think they cheat, they fudge, they panic, they say this is not for me. And I don't remember where I was reading somewhere, but like someone was saying there was someone in our Discord was saying there's an online forum, and it's like the number of players, the player to GM ratio is like 30-1.
So by the way, I went into my closet real quick to see if I had my Hectotome, because I do have them. I have it, but I couldn't find it. It's probably buried deep, but I did find my Nuclear War from 1980.
Wow, Nuclear War.
Nuclear War, the original. Look at how crappy these cards are. Look at that. It's like not even. It's like barely cardboard stock. Like back in the 80s. Like here's what we had to contend with. So we'll talk about gatekeeping.
That's
it's
like the
back in my
super
day.
Ridiculous playtest cards.
Look at this. Yeah, this is what playtest. This is garbage. And
for
this
like
is
the Pathfinder Adventure card game, were just like a piece of white
it's just
paper with like words on it.
Yeah, it's just like this is the game, and this is what you would get. I mean, okay, here's the Megaton cards.
Wait, those at least have some.
Yeah, these are real
art
cards.
or
Yeah, these are real. But this is from 1980. This is my original deck, and it's like, let's look at the rules. I was like, I'm very curious. Oh, look at this. God,
is there like a duck and cover card that lets you?
By the way, people are schooling me. They're saying that my ratio of 30-1 is way off. They're saying it's more like 100-1.
Look how old that is. And here's the rules. Are you ready for the rules?
Well, I'm just saying.
Look at that.
Okay.
Oh, look at that. Oh, that is so old.
How does the hobby survive if it's 100-1?
I don't know.
To GM ratio.
Oh my God,
that's insane.
This is.
I guess. Yeah, that's pretty tricky.
Oh my God, I gotta read
this.
I gotta read
100
this.
Players.
Let's talk about
players to GMs, or is that 100 people who want to play to GM? Some of whom I think never read the book.
I think they're saying that it's people in the official. Well, the official.
Oh my God. Okay, do you want to take the test? There's the official.
Right. Jesus, we're talking role play game, Steven.
No, this is good. This is a Star Web aptitude test, an excellent play-by-mail strategy space game. Do you like war games, science fiction, role-playing games, computer games, play-by-mail games, and lots of competition, the clash of stellar empires, special abilities for each of the 6 different types of empires, a printout of every turn listing all that you own, a chance to use the Planet Buster bomb. It's like, and here it is. If you want this, you can
ask if I liked all of those things.
No, you score 1 point for each that you like.
I like some of those things.
Well, so then how about up to 15 enemies or allies in 15 in each game, or 225 star systems to fight and deal over, ancient artifacts to try to collect, a point scoring system to determine the winner, and some time in between turns for processing. It's pass or fail, by the way. Yes, if you like all above, send $1 for your copy of the rules to StarWeb. And it's Flying Buffalo, by the way.
Of course it is.
Oh yeah, well, this is who invented this. $1, and this was copyright. Wow, Nuclear War copyright 1965. Wow, I didn't even know it was that old. But
wow,
yeah, I know. Even I was like, damn.
So
man.
what you're telling me is you've got like a 19th edition. That's what you're telling me.
Actually, I'm kind of surprised. Well, it's not 19th. It's probably like 15th. But yes, it is. This game actually is, by the way, this is a very, very good game, by the way. Yeah, but that is like, it's fascinating. I just quickly went in to see what it was, quote, like back in the day. And nowadays, like to find one of these games, you go to Barnes & Noble and find a game like this. You just get it anywhere you want. You go to Amazon.
We got the official numbers. There's apparently it is an official WotC Discord. Advertised. It's owned by WotC staff and it's advertised on the WotC website. There are 60,847 people with the player role and 322 people with the DM role.
Where's that?
On the official D&D 5th edition Discord.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So
How nuts is that? Huh?
So the answer is never ever publish adventure again. See, that doesn't make any sense. I don't understand that because
I don't think that the determining who has what role.
No. I think
I actually probably.
I mean, I'm not trying to say you should make a scientific marketing based effort research of that, but that is a data point.
Here is my hypothesis, which is not based on anything other than supposition and the fact that it's clearly obvious that you can't have a 200-to-1 ratio, is that people who thought it's what the tags are used for, right? On a lot of these servers, the player or GM tag can sometimes be used for looking for groups, places with if you take the player tag if you're looking as a player, or when you come on and it's like, which are you right now? And it's player. I think that people signed up as player because that was how they started, and then didn't bother to change to DM.
Okay, but let's say that is off by an order of magnitude, and it is not 200, and it is 20-to-1, not 200-to-1. That's still problematic.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think 20-to-1 is probably more accurate.
And if it is 20-to-1, that means 95% of the base are players, and 5% of the base are DMs.
Which is something else. I would say the number 2 thing they want to get rid of, maybe even number 1, is the GM, which is why oneD&D is going to be.
It's the limiting reagent to the money equation.
By far the limiting, and that is why I guarantee that oneD&D. I know people think that I'm getting a lot of feedback on this one. People are like, "No way is that turning into a video game that you can just play without a GM." 100% they're going to turn that into a video game you can play without a GM. Now, I'm not saying you
what
don't.
Would that even be?
It will be okay. Have you played all those? There's a lot of board games out now, like not House on Haunted Hill. There's a couple of those Mansions of Madness, which requires
Gloomhaven,
right? And Gloomhaven doesn't need a GM. But Mountains of Madness. Mansion of Madness, whatever, does require a GM. But then they came out with 2nd edition, which is an iPad app that acts as the GM, and that's what it does. Is it perfect? No, but I guarantee they're going to make a version of oneD&D that does not require a GM.
I'll also tell you this. Recently, we played a sort of a experiment. There is a RPG that was released. Technically it's called Powered by the Apocalypse game, but it's its own. It's a fork. It's its own fork. I was shocked. Not because the game is bad. I think the game is good. But I was shocked that this game called Ironforged and its sci-fi spinoff called Starforged did as well as it did. Not for because it's a bad game, but just because it's fairly niche. But what it's because
you playing a niche game? No, tell me more.
It's because it is an RPG game that you can play solo. And apparently a lot of the
solo games, but yeah.
A lot of the success of this game, both titles, Ironforged and Starforged, have come from it being soloable. And
that game Last Girl is soloable too. That's only you can only play it solo. That game's hugely popular.
And it never made sense to me until it makes sense. It's like if you want to be part of this and you can't find a GM or DM, then that makes sense where a solo game can come in. And the way we even played it was as sort of a collab. Right now, it doesn't use monsters and grids and minis and stuff like that.
You know what I want to play? Actually, I wanted to get you maybe on this. Is Legends of the Legend Kingdoms, the Valley of the Bones. Choose your own adventure game.
Yeah, Steven wanted me to run that for him, and
you build real characters, and then you choose what you want to do, and you fight. And this thing is an actual role-playing game, but choose your own adventure. This would be interesting. I tell you, you could play the characters and then have Mark GM it or something. I think that would be fascinating.
You can do it without a GM.
No, you don't. You just have someone kind of help run it, because it'll just be easier. But they help read it and tell what happens and play the role of the monsters
to make the stream of it work, because Steven wants to do it as a stream.
Yeah, I think that should be really fun, actually. And there's a second book out too, and this is. It's interesting. And but you know what? A lot of very popular games out now, board games, we've talked about this, are these kind of choose your own adventure type board games that have these huge books, and that the combat is combat, but then the decisions are based on A, what you choose, and B, what your characters have done. Like you have to check off boxes, and like, has your character found this shell, the magic shell? Yes. Okay, well then you can like open up the sacrificial altar. No. Okay, well then you have to come back, and then you go find it, and then you come back. But it's all done through. Am I boring you, Derek?
So do you think that they're going to make Steven, that they're going to make chatbot AIs that AI DMs that you can say what you're going to do, and the chatbot AI has trained on enough stuff that it'll respond and run the game for you?
All it does is, how do you want to do that? Just, that's all.
You know what? Here's the thing: is that okay? There's a lot of talk about AI art now. Okay. And in fact, in our Lauren in our game has become obsessed with it, and she has been doing AI art. I can't believe how good the art, like she's been showing us AI art. If you didn't tell me this was AI art, I wouldn't tell you someone drew it, because
that's because someone did draw a lot of the components of it. Because they trained on a training set that lets them pull art from people who did draw it.
The point is that roguelikes are so popular in all these games because they're procedurally generated, and even parts of them, like Grand Theft Auto 5, good example. A lot of people played it. Do you know how big? I mean, the Grand Theft Auto 5 is gargantuan, okay? And it looks incredibly realistic, especially like the roads. I'm just using roads as an example. The roads don't just look like roads. Like there's actual like potholes and like pavement and like patches in the roads. And depending where you are, it changes. Some areas are smoother than others. And it looks incredibly realistic. Some of that's done by hand, but 99% of that is procedurally generated. And that is what they can do with these AIs, is that, maybe it's not perfect, but I hate to break it to you, for 98% of the time, it's going to be good enough. Especially for if you're running, they're going to build the adventures to work with the AI. Or will you be able to do something like, I don't know, some like Kingmaker? That's a good example. Will you be able to do Kingmaker? Which ironically is a video game and single player. But the point being, if you wanted to do Kingmaker as a true role-playing, probably not, because it's too open-ended. But if you wanted to do a more linear type game, which by the way most adventure paths are, you can, because you're supposed to be kind of on rails to begin with. So I think that's what's going to happen. Oh, Derek, you disagree 100%.
No. I disagree with being on rails 100%, but I do agree that I mean, look.
Oh, but these will be. That's the point.
I'm saying that people play through video games all the time, and obviously that's essentially being on rails. It's obviously being controlled by a set of scripts and prompts, and I don't understand why that wouldn't be very much different for a lot of
that's
people.
The thing. Everyone's like, "Oh, it never happened." As I go play my video game, I'm like, dude, what do you think you're playing? These are all computers. I was like, you'll be amazed what they will be able to do. Will you be able to sit there and have the same level of interaction? God, no. But that's why oneD&D looks like a video game. And boy,
but I will say this though.
Yeah.
That's why you got to buy the hardcover prints, people.
Oh yeah, completely right.
That's why they can never take them away from you. I could sit down, I can crack open my Moldvay Cook Basic from 1983, and I could play that bad boy if I want to.
I'm going to tell you, it's going to go full circle. It's going to go full circle. It's going to go from open role-playing games where everyone using their imagination and all that, and you're just whatever you say can do, to what it is now, to oneD&D where it's heavily scripted, to these niche groups. Like in 30 years, you're going to be like, there's these people who just sit around and just discuss things instead of playing oneD&D and going through the pre-written adventure. It's going to be mind-blowing. There's
this crazy old 70-year-old man who stays up at the comic store, and he keeps talking about theater of the mind.
I know. That's what's going to happen. It's going to go full circle. I guarantee it.
I mean, one of my favorite things about this was, I remember when Magic the Gathering came out, right? It was a card game, but it wasn't a board game. You owned the cards. They were yours. You built your deck. And I remember when Dominion came out, and Dominion was a very, very popular board game. I mean, it's a card game, but Dominion's big thing. It was like, imagine a card game where you don't own the cards and it's just all in one box. And people are like, wait, isn't that just a board game? But like everybody was so sick of buying Magic cards all the time. Everyone was like, this is amazing. We could just play with these decks of cards and no one has to collect anything. Wow, what a concept.
Yeah, like
imagine a card game.
Imagine a card game where you just
from the person who actually owns them.
Yeah, like battles, like Eldamon battles. You don't have to collect anything. You just buy it and you own it. What a weird idea. Everything comes around, man. Everything comes around. It's gonna turn. I guarantee it's gonna be one day like there's this subset of people playing D&D version 83, which is sitting around and just talking.
Now, this is, by the way, I'll put on my transhumanist hat real quickly and say this is all, of course, assuming that in 20 years, we're not all just like, we don't jack into the metaverse and we just get beamed and experience. But, you know.
That's not 20 years from now. That's
all right. You're right. 15.
Oh, wow. You're even. That's like the arguments I have with my friends.
Steven, 20 years ago, there was barely a World Wide Web. So, you know, I mean.
I was on the World Wide Web since 86, man.
Yeah, well, you were. I'm talking about there was no iPhones. There was no smartphones. I'm just saying, imagine what it'll look like in 20 years. It could be crazy.
There was a lot of World Wide Web before smartphones.
There was. No, I know what you're saying. Trust me, I always think about this. I've said it before in the show, but I'll say it again. Is that back in the day, okay, when Doom came out, the original, remember Doom, like the super, it was like in 2004. No, the updated one, the one that came out like in 2004. That was super state of the art. Like the graphics were incredible, and everyone was talking about how like this is just mind blowing how good it was. And PC Magazine used to do their April Fool's issue. And their April Fool's issue would have all these things. And this is like Doom just came out, the new version. And on it, it's like Doom now works on your phone. And this was like supposed to be 5 years in the future. And I was thinking, oh my God, this thing could barely run on your computers. And they're talking about it being on your phone? Come on, that's insane. 5 years later, it was on your phone. They were actually right. I was like, holy crap. So when you say that, I don't think it's feasible just because they still haven't gotten the wetware to work yet. But if they could, they would.
I mean, a high-res photo from your iPhone is bigger than the file size of the original Doom game.
Oh yeah, no, the high-res photo from it's like after 5 megapixels, it's almost, you can't tell, and now it's like everything in your phone is like 20 megapixels. You know, it's insanity.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, but the wetware is still too far behind. Well, we got more than 50 likes, so we got to do something silly. Tell us all about the Lord of the Rings, Derek. Tell us
what are your Valar in order?
Yes. My Valar in order. Okay, well, Aule is my favorite, and then well, here, you know what? Okay, I will give you this. I will give you my Lord of the Rings conspiracy theory.
Oh, I want to hear this.
It's very
Can
nerdy.
I find my tinfoil hat?
No, I mean, listen, it's my personal pet peeve. So again, okay, so when Eru Iluvatar, who is the sort of god and creator of the universe,
sure, of course, everyone knows that,
right? He decided to create. Have creation, and to do this, it's called the Ayunu Dulale. And so, to do this, he created these spirits, these beings, called the Ainur. And there's 2 choirs of Ainur. There is the Valar, which are the greater spirits, and then there's the Maiar, which are the lesser spirits. Now, these Valar were sort of the greatest of the Ainur, and they sang this song, which created creation. And to do so, when Eru Iluvatar created each of the Valar, he did so with a shard of his mind, or its mind. And that way they would sing the themes and represent the ideas that Eru Iluvatar wanted to bring into existence. Now, one of these, the greatest one, was called Melkor. Now, Melkor ended up wanting to create his own music, and he wanted to create his own life, and that is something that only Eru Iluvatar could do. Melkor became Morgoth, which became the super big bad, and Morgoth had a little lieutenant named Sauron, who ended up becoming a big problem many thousands of years later. My conspiracy theory
I've heard of that. By the way, I actually did know that. Okay. By the way,
so my theory is that Eru Iluvatar, being this over creator, wanted to create this world, and the shard of his mind that wanted to create and build something new. That is what Melkor was. And that is why Melkor was the strongest. And so in a sense, Melkor wanting to do his own thing and create his own life wasn't because he was evil. It's because that was that part of Eru Iluvatar's mind and essence and being, that desire, that willingness to create, went into that particular Valar. And so him wanting to go against the music and do his own thing kind of wasn't his fault. It was because by definition, he was the shard. He was that part. He was the creative, build your own universe part of Eru Iluvatar's mind and essence. And so, in a way, he kind of got set up. Or you could argue it was the plan of the Grand Creator all along.
So it's not like the Judas was an okay guy because he was supposed to play that part.
Yes.
Theory of the Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Well, isn't that like Satan? Like getting cast out from the angels? It's the same thing.
It's the same basic principle, but in this case, because the main thing is that Melkor wanted to do was create life. And in fact, Aule, who I like, created the dwarves, but only Eru Iluvatar could create life because he possessed something called the flame imperishable, also sometimes called the secret fire. And you may have heard that term before because Gandalf says that to the Balrog on the bridge of Khazad-dûm. He says, I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. And the servant of the secret fire is him saying, I'm not some guy with a pointy hat. I am a servant of the secret fire, which is Eru Iluvatar. I am a servant of the high and one true God. And so the secret fire, the flame imperishable, is the only thing that can truly create new life. And none of the Valar could do this, but I argue that Melkor had that part that wanted to do it. Melkor wanted to create his own life, but he couldn't because he did not possess the flame imperishable. And so instead, he corrupted things. The great eagles got corrupted to dragons. The elves got corrupted to orcs. The Ents got corrupted to trolls, etc.
Let me ask you another conspiracy theory. When he says, "Fly, you fools," was he speaking in code?
No,
to tell them to call on the eagles to have him fly to Mount Doom, or was he just saying that?
No, the eagles were created by Manwë, who is the Lord of the Wings and the King of the Valar, and they are an intelligent species.
Oh no, the eagles. Eagles don't want probably anything to do with this.
Right. Well, there's a couple of things. Number one, Gandalf. Why didn't they fly the ring? Because the eagles would be corrupted by the ring as well.
True.
Being an intelligent being, they were corruptible.
Would they be? Because you do have, what's his name? Samwise picks up Frodo, and he can carry him, but he can't carry the ring. Okay. So wouldn't the transitive property work with the eagles? Because
Sam though had this.
Sam was pure of heart and was incorruptible. That's the whole
juxtaposition of the show, is that Sam is his love for Frodo, his loyalty to Frodo is so great.
And for those people who are wondering how geeky we are, by the way.
But I did read something though the other day that really did get me. And I always thought about this. If you watch the end of the Return of the King, and it's like it's like the moment we go, Frodo and Sam escape from Ordurun, and then they're on the slopes of Mount Doom, the lava's flowing around them, and he passes out, and then there's a scene where they're laying on the thing, and there's beautiful elvish music, which the lyrics for it are great because it's like I saw an eagle coming out of the east. Anyways, and the eagles come in, Gandalf's on one, and there's 3 eagles, and one picks up Frodo, one picks up Sam, and the moment when you realize that the 3rd eagle was supposed to be for Smeagol.
Wow, you got me there. I love Lord of the Rings. Gandalf he probably wanted to
save all 3 because in his mind, he knew that Gollum quote, had an important part to play. He didn't know what that part was, but Gandalf brought 3 eagles so that he could carry all 3.
I did not know that.
From safety.
That is interesting. I love Lord of the Rings. I've seen the extended versions in the theater, no less.
I watched we went to a marathon, 11 hours.
I did that.
With intermissions between the two the films.
I have listened to all four of the commentary tracks on the extended versions.
And they're so good. I mean, the
really acting one, actually, the acting one isn't that great. That one's all right. The best one, well, obviously with the directors and his wife, like that one's incredible. And then they do talk about the music and who did it again from the Rhythmics? No, Eurythmics, the last song.
Annie Lennox.
Annie Lennox. That
Into the
song
West.
is, oh my God, that song will break you. That song is so, they were like crying when they're talking about that song, because it's actually about like a cancer patient that she wrote it for. It's breathtaking. The costume design and those people when their voiceovers, commentary tricks, that's the best one. That's the most interesting one by far.
It's incredible. In fact, potentially, maybe some of my friends, we are maybe thinking about doing a big international trip, and we might go to New Zealand. And if we go to New Zealand, I'm going to Hobbiton.
Yeah.
There will be a lot of Derik pretends to be in the Lord of the Rings.
You know what? I'm still angry. My brother was offered the Lord of the Rings TV show.
Oh.
And he freaking turned it down. And I'm still angry with him to this end. Like, Danny, you freaking moron. Like, he was actually offered all of them. He was offered Lord of the Rings. He was offered the Wheel of Time. And he was offered the Dragon. He was offered everything.
Yeah. Well, my take on it would be House of the Dragon so far, very, very good. I'm interested to see what they do after the actor shift after episode 5. So thumbs up to that. Rings of Power. Jury's still out. We're still watching that one to see how it's going to go. Wheel of Time, I can't endorse it. I did not enjoy it.
Yeah, Danny. Well, Danny also knew like he didn't do that one because he knew the budget and he knew things about that one, so he didn't do that one. Lord of the Rings, I mean, they had $1 billion, so that's not going anywhere. And then obviously the Dragon one, but instead he's actually doing a new series with the guy who did Old Boy for HBO. That's his new thing out. I don't know what it is. Oh, it is Robert Downey Jr. playing like all the roles or something. It's supposed to be awesome. I don't know if I probably shouldn't have said anything, but anyhow, he's doing something else right now. My brother's a costume designer in Hollywood, but anyhow, yes, the thing at 50 people, like, what was we supposed to happen at 50 likes? Well, we also lost like 20 people watching us, so good job, Derik. like everyone's like, what do we get? We get long diatribes about Lord of the Rings and everyone leaving.
And the last interesting thing would be that but ironically though, even though I don't own a lot of Lord of the Rings role-playing games, I do have a problem with playing Lord of the Rings role-playing games.
I have a lot of problems with playing the game because it's such a tight story that how do you play the game without ruining the world? That's actually a big problem.
And I actually just talked about this recently.
That would be the same thing if you tried to play the World of Warcraft back when I used to know the lore really well. Like, it's hard. You can't play the World of Warcraft game at high levels without breaking the lore.
So this is a really interesting product from Modiphius. Number one, it's a box set, so that's awesome.
I saw that.
But this is Agents of Dune, and this just came out recently, and this supports their 2D20 Dune game. Yeah. And look, what's cool about this game is everything about Dune. It's great, except
Dune takes place over like 10,000 years. So.
Well, yeah, okay, but this is everything. This is everything during the sort of Paul Atreides time, the movie stuff. But what it does is it says, because it gets rid of Paul Atreides and it gets rid of House Atreides, and it creates like an alternate reality where you are this new house that has been given Arrakis, and everything that you know about the background of Dune is still the same. There's still weird floating aliens that fold space and all this other crazy stuff. But they don't actually fold space. The Holtzman engines do, but that's not the point. The point is it frees you from the IP.
Yes.
Right. It frees you from the IP. And so that to me is really, really compelling. And I think for Lord of the Rings to really be successful, you would have to do something like that.
So let me ask you, is it Harkonnen or Harkonnen?
All right. So it is Harkonnen. That is how Frank Herbert pronounced it, Harkonnen. But the original David Lynch version pronounced it Harkonnen. Right. And I like that.
Well, then is it Voldemort or Voldemort?
Voldemort, because you told us that.
That's true. That is true. That's the correct way of saying it. Well, have you heard about Data and Data? Because in that one I've talked about too. And
Patrick Stewart.
Because Patrick Stewart decided to call it Data.
Like, okay,
that's how we pronounce it.
I'm sorry, everybody who's still here, but whatever. Screw you guys.
Wow! Don't say screw you guys.
No. One of my, you said 20 people. You said 20 people left, right? One of my most. So I mean, as a kid, Best of Both Worlds, episode 1, episode 2, incredible end of season 3, beginning of season 4, Star Trek Next Generation, some of the best television ever written. And at the time, too, by the way, they weren't sure, is Patrick Stewart going to leave the show?
Right, that's why they had the cliffhanger and all that, because if they could kill him off, and But
obviously, I am Locutus of Borg.
Right.
Lower, blah, 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 blah. Resistance is futile.
Right.
It's like the coolest
Futile
line ever.
versus futile.
Right. And later on in Star Trek 8, First Contact,
Right.
Data is corrupted by the Borg Queen, and at the end he betrays her because he's like come to his senses.
Correct.
And he goes, resistance is futile, and he smashes the thing. And I always was like, oh, it doesn't sound as cool when you say it like that.
I know. Well, that's actually, they're very inconsistent with how that's sometimes.
I know.
Sometimes it's futile and sometimes it's futile.
Right.
They do. That is inconsistent, and I wouldn't be surprised if Lower Decks does a riff off that.
That would be fun.
Because if there's, that's like something Lower Decks. Man, last week's Lower Decks was good too. They were like crawling around the ship. I love that one.
Now, see, Stephen, to understand the D&D issue, you and I are talking about this, and then someone shows up and they go, I really like Star Trek Picard or Discovery. And we're like, oh, okay. Well, have you watched any other Star Treks? No, I don't want to bother with any of those.
You're 100% right. Oh, no, yeah. Well, that's what's going to happen because there's
you and I
so much Star Trek now that there will be. I mean, think about it. There's a lot of Star Trek now. And the weird part is I was so upset that there was no Star Trek on, and now there's so much Star Trek, and I don't watch any of it. I'm like, I watch Lower Decks and Discovery, and that's it. Although I hear the Nickelodeon show is actually supposed to be excellent, by the way, even though it's a kids show. That's supposed to be a very good show. I'm kind of curious. The cartoon show. I'm kind of curious about that one. But you're right. It's that people.
The cartoon show, I saw that one, and I would say that it's one of the better.
I hear it's fun.
It's not only one of the better like Star Wars cartoon shows that I've seen, but it's the only one that's in the Star Trek universe.
Yeah, and it's supposed to have, and it has Janeway, who I like Janeway a lot.
Yeah, like the fact that you just responded yes to that, Stephen. I'm not sure you heard what I said exactly. But
what? That it's.
I said it's not only one.
I
of the
heard
best
what you said. I said you misspoke.
Shows that I've seen, but it's the only one in the Star Trek universe.
Well, I don't mind it being a Star. I don't mind Star Wars and Star Trek.
I think it's better done than some of the. I mean, obviously, Clone Wars and some of the other Star Wars cartoon shows are good, but it's better than some of the more recent Star Wars shows, in my opinion, and is very Star Warsy.
Even though it's Star Trek.
I thought it was done pretty well.
You know what? I don't have a problem with that because you know what? The like Year of Hell and any of those shows are freaking the whole Zindi. You know, Star Trek never got combat-y. I like when they got combat-y. I like Deep Space Nine. I like the fighting. You know, like give it to me. I'll take that stuff. I don't mind the Star Trek and I don't mind Star Wars and my Star Trek, you know? It's all like, it doesn't have to be all diplomatic, you know, like talking and figuring out things through federations. It could be blowing up planets. I have no problems with that whatsoever.
I don't even mean just in that regard, just into the, like, there's this sinister, like, Sith Lordiest looking bad guy, and
here's my lightsaber. I mean my laser sword. You know, it's like, oh, okay, sorry. Or the laser whips, the Ferengi with the laser whips. Remember those? That lasted like one episode.
I think it was two episodes.
Actually, it was two episodes. Oh, we got a super chat.
Oh yeah, here's one.
5D&D. Who's this from? Actually, you read it. I don't have my glasses on.
Who put in the $50 one earlier on?
Hey, he's back. So what, you want to read it? Because I don't have my glasses on.
He says
5 D&D GMs fudging their combats for their players are like Samwise carrying Frodo up Mount Doom. I cannot carry it for you, but I can carry you.
That is, you are going into my vernacular. I'm going to say that in all my games. That is excellent analogy. I love that analogy. I've been seeing a lot of, I don't know why, I guess because Lord of the Rings is popular, but I have been seeing a lot of posts on Facebook and social media about Samwise and Frodo and all that stuff. It's all over the place. So, and now you get to see, by the way, this only happens like twice a year. The sun is at such an angle that at this time of day, I have the sun give me this cool, like, look at that. I kind of look like I'm like in science fiction. Like I got the weird like bars on my chest. That's right.
Yeah, you got those crosshatch.
I know. I got crosshatch on my chest. It's very cool. It's actually just the blinds doing something.
Yeah,
wacky.
It looks like blinds.
It's blinds.
The little white circles being like the middle part.
I know, but it's actually, these are my rank and insignia. Look, I'm a captain. Look. Derik. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
I think I broke Derik.
No.
I gotta go.
I broke you.
That's
I
it.
broke you.
Everyone. We broke Derik. He's not going to even be on his show tonight.
Yeah,
just kidding.
Yeah, no.
Oh yeah, what's your show tonight?
Yeah, 7 p.m. We're just doing a GM Q&A.
I'm gonna go on there and crash it.
The last couple of weeks, we've spent a lot of time talking about Root and Legend of the Five Rings. So none of you have been watching. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate it.
Are you playing? Did you play Root yet? I don't have Root, by the way. It's one of the ones I don't have.
We are. Here's the thing. I'm building a studio. I'm building a set. I'm actually building a set for a Root game. Yeah.
You seem to have a lot of projects, but never seem to complete them. Like you dressing up as a Leshy. Whatever happened to that?
October 25th.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
have you tried Winter? How about this
Halloween.
one? Have you tried
Are you going
Wander
to trick
Home?
or
Have you
treat
tried
as
this one yet?
the Leshy though?
Yeah, so October 25th, I'm going to be Popcorn, the Vine Leshy Dragon Instinct Barbarian, and then there's going to be a bunch of other people.
They just released that
You'll
free
have
for
to send me
Roll20.
a picture of yourself cosplaying as Popcorn so I can show it to Linda since she and Eleanor wrote the adventure.
So I do have to cosplay as a Leshy, and Bob from our channel is going to be running it. And it's
what
day
are you doing that? The 25th.
I think it's
unfortunately it's like right in the middle, like when the playoffs and World Series are. I doubt I can get out there because
it's
the
a
Guardians
Tuesday.
are not going to make it to that round. So
it's a Tuesday. It's going to take the place of one of our normal games. So that's happening October 25th.
I almost want to
we're gonna have some of our friends from our Discord are going to be on, including the SOB who tipped enough that I now have to cosplay. He's going to be playing with us as well. So that's gonna be a lot of fun.
Who's doing your costume?
I don't know. Me? I don't know. Maybe I'll
just talk to my brother. He'll help you.
Listen, you make that happen.
He won't do the fantasy things that you wanted him to do, Steven.
Yeah, I mean, he could probably give you some suggestions. He only does costumes for a living.
That's what I was saying. I mean, I know my way around a sewing machine. But I can't say it would be very good. But anyways, the point really is to embarrass me and mock me and make sure that people know that I'm not having a good time, and then they will have a good time. It's a
shot in front.
It's a shot in front of watch completely. And so that's October 25th. We'll be having some announcements about that, but we are doing a regular GM live stream, a Q&A live stream tonight. So if you have questions about Pathfinder or other role-playing games, you want to stop by and hang out and chat with us, that'd be awesome. So
and as for Arcane Mark, if you want to watch
canceled.
an episode on GM tools using environments, don't tune in tonight because we're canceled since there's been a lot of stuff going on with at Linda's work. We're canceled tonight. I will be posting about it on Twitter, and we'll move that to next week's episode.
Sounds good. That means you should all come to the nights tonight.
Yours is already 3 hours before mine because we're at 7 p.m. in different time zones.
We'll just keep going. We'll just keep going then.
There you go. Just keep going for more than 3 hours.
Well, the only time we've ever really done that is during the all spells raked time. We did a couple 4-hour streams there to try to power through some of the levels, but we're gonna do we're probably gonna do a class tier ranking here soon. We've never done one of those, so spoiler alert.
That won't be contentious at all.
I mean, you people could disagree, but people can also be wrong. But
it's funny how you're also people.
Well, the people are free. If there's one thing that ties together the Knights of Last Call, both our community and the folks here on the show, is that none of us agree with each other. So definitely come and hang out with us tonight. We'll see you there. So, and thanks for having me on, gentlemen.
Yeah, thanks for being on.
Thank you very much. And I don't know if we're having one next week because it's actually the Jewish holiday, so I don't know if I'm around.
Oh, okay.
So we'll see.
But for everyone who's watching, we didn't actually talk about this earlier on in the show, but if you have Jewel of Indigo Isles from the first Kickstarter, you should go online because you can get the early access version with the first book and all the ancestries from the character guide and the over 30-page free player's guide. Even if you didn't buy Jewel of Indigo Isles, you can still get the free player's guide if you want it.
Yep.
All right.
You just go to battlezoo.com. All right.
Yep.
I will talk to you